Hey there, tonight we're diving into the strange rituals of the ancient Egyptians. What you're about to discover is that their afterlife preparations make Hollywood's mummy tales look like child's play. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. Welcome to the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and apparently compulsive hand washers. Yes, if you thought the ancient Egyptians were all about lounging around in golden splendor, sipping on Nile water martinis, you've got another thing coming. These folks were obsessed with hygiene in a way that would make your average germaphobe look like a festival goer who hasn't seen a shower in 3 days. And we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill rinse and repeat. No, they had a whole ritualistic dance around cleanliness that involved natron, a naturally occurring compound of sodium carbonate, and an array of scented oils that could make an essential oils salesman weep with envy. First off, let's talk natron. This stuff was the ancient equivalent of a Swiss army knife. It's like baking soda on steroids. It mummified bodies, cleaned teeth, and even served as a laundry detergent. The Egyptians used it like it was going out of style, scrubbing themselves from head to toe. Imagine waking up each day, reaching for a chunk of natron, and going to town on your body as if your life depended on it. Spoiler alert. It kinda did. The ancient Egyptians believed that cleanliness was next to, well, godliness. Not only did being clean keep you in the good graces of the gods, but it also kept pesky diseases at bay, which is pretty important when your alternative is a nice case of Nile fever. But let's pause here and address the myth of Egypt being a perfumed paradise. You might picture the ancient Egyptians wafting through their days in clouds of sweet-smelling incense, but the reality was a touch less glamorous. True, they had a knack for perfumes, concocting scents from flowers, herbs, and spices, but the cost was eye-watering. We're talking a small fortune for a dab of the good stuff. To put it in perspective, a high-quality perfume could cost you a laborer's monthly wage, which is like spending your rent money on a bottle of designer cologne today. So, while the elite may have been able to afford to smell like a garden in full bloom, the average Joe by the Nile likely smelled more like, well, the Nile. And it wasn't just about smelling good. The political and social factors driving this cleanliness craze were as layered as an onion, and probably smelled a lot better. The pharaohs and priests had a vested interest in maintaining a squeaky clean image, both literally and figuratively. They were seen as divine intermediaries, and no one wants a grubby god representative. So the rituals of washing and anointing with oils were as much about maintaining social order as they were about personal hygiene. Now, if you think this sounds like a full-time job, you're not far off. Maintaining this level of cleanliness required time, effort, and resources. It wasn't just a quick scrub in the morning. It was a multi-step process. For the average Egyptian, this meant juggling daily chores, work, and the ever-looming task of not offending the gods with body odor. And while the elite had servants to help with these rituals, the common folk had to manage it all between tending fields and avoiding crocodiles. Talk about a busy schedule. But what's fascinating is that these rituals weren't just about survival. They were about identity. The Egyptians saw themselves as set apart from the rest of the world, which they considered uncivilized and, frankly, a bit smelly. Their obsession with cleanliness was a way to reinforce cultural superiority and divine favor. It was as much about saying, "We're better than you," as it was about avoiding a nasty infection. You could say that for the Egyptians, cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness. It was practically a state religion. And let's not forget the economic kickbacks. The production of natron and scented oils was big business. The temples, which acted both as religious and economic centers, controlled much of this trade. So every time you scrubbed down with natron or dabbed on some oil, you were feeding into a vast economic machine that bolstered temple power and the broader economy. It's like the ancient version of investing in Apple stock every time you bought a new iPhone. So next time you're grumbling about the cost of your favorite shampoo or rolling your eyes at yet another celebrity-endorsed fragrance, spare a thought for the ancient Egyptians. Their quest for cleanliness wasn't just about pleasing the gods or smelling nice. It was a complex web of social, political, and economic factors that shaped daily life on the Nile. And while it might be tempting to romanticize the idea of a perfumed paradise, the truth is a bit grittier and a lot more interesting. But hey, who doesn't love a good myth with a splash of reality? Now, speaking of myths with a splash of reality, let's dive, pun intended, into the peculiar yet fascinating annual drowning of the Pharaoh ceremony. This ritual involved, you guessed it, symbolically drowning the ruler of Egypt. Now, before you start picturing some elaborate game of Pharaoh bobbing for apples, let's clarify what this entailed. This wasn't about sending the ruler to a watery grave, although it sure sounds like an HR nightmare, but rather a theatrical display designed to affirm the Pharaoh's divine connection and, surprise, surprise, solidify their grip on power. The ancient Egyptians were nothing if not theatrical, and this ritual was the Oscars of religious ceremonies, minus the red carpet and awkward acceptance speeches. Picture this. The pharaoh, decked out in regal splendor, would be ceremonially immersed in the Nile, only to emerge yet again as a living deity. It was like spiritual rebirth with a side of political posturing. The whole spectacle was a reminder to the common folk that the pharaoh was no mere mortal, but a god walking amongst them. And what better way to prove that than by surviving a symbolic drowning when most would probably just end up as a footnote in history? Now, you might be wondering why anyone would volunteer for a ritual that involves nearly meeting your maker every year. Well, it's all about political theater, my friend. See, ancient Egypt wasn't just built on pyramids, but also on power plays. The pharaoh's ability to metaphorically emerge unscathed from the depths of chaos was a testament to their strength and divine favor. It was a carefully choreographed performance that said, "Hey, I'm literally unbeatable." And in a time when ruling could be as perilous as juggling cobras, every little bit of divine affirmation helped. Let's not forget the economic angle, because, as history teaches us, follow the money and you'll find the truth. These ceremonies were costly affairs, funded by temple treasuries and the labor of thousands. The temples, which were not just religious, but also economic powerhouses, had a vested interest in keeping this show running. After all, a pharaoh who is perceived as divine keeps the donations flowing and the economy spinning. It's like the ancient equivalent of a blockbuster movie. High production value, a leading star, and lots of spectators shelling out their hard-earned goods for a chance to witness the spectacle. But let's not get too carried away with the romanticism of it all. The reality was far grittier and a lot less Instagram-worthy. For all its grandeur, the ceremony wasn't without its risks. The Nile wasn't exactly a chlorinated pool. Think murky waters teeming with crocodiles, hippos, and all manner of waterborne diseases. So, while the pharaohs might have emerged from the ritual with their divine status intact, they probably also came out with a healthy respect for the local wildlife. And remember, this wasn't just about the pharaoh. The ritual was a communal affair involving priests, nobles, and the general populace. It was as much a social event as it was a religious one. For the nobles, it was a chance to align themselves with the divine and secure their own positions within the social hierarchy. For the common folk, it was a day off from the usual grind of farming and construction, and a rare opportunity to see their ruler in the flesh, proving that even in ancient times, nothing drew a crowd quite like a little drama. Of course, like any good tradition, the drowning of the pharaoh evolved over time. Different dynasties added their own flair, some more lavish than others. The ritual's endurance is a testament to its effectiveness in reinforcing the power structures of the time. It's a classic example of how myth and reality intertwine to shape not just a ruler's image, but also the very fabric of society. So next time you're grumbling about political theatrics or the price of a movie ticket, remember the ancient Egyptians and their penchant for for ritual drama. They knew that sometimes a little spectacle was just what the doctor, or in this case, the priest, ordered to keep the wheels of power turning smoothly. Because in the end, whether you're a pharaoh or just a regular Joe, everyone loves a good show. Speaking of a good show, let's unravel another spectacle that's been wrapped in layers of linen and mystery for millennia: mummification. Ah, yes, the ancient Egyptian practice that's been romanticized to the hilt in Hollywood and Halloween parties alike. But before you start picturing a suave Boris Karloff in bandages, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of what really went down when pharaohs, and even the occasional ambitious commoner, decided they weren't quite done with the mortal coil. Mummification was far from a one-size-fits-all affair. For those with a penchant for luxury, the process could be as elaborate as a royal wedding, complete with a price tag to match. At its core, mummification was about preserving the body for the afterlife, a sort of celestial insurance policy. But the reality was as much about economics and social standing as it was about spiritual beliefs. Let's start with the basics. The Egyptians believed that preserving the body was crucial for the soul's journey to the afterlife. This meant keeping it in recognizable shape, which, when you think about it, is an admirable goal in a world without refrigeration. Enter the embalmers, the unsung heroes or villains, depending on your perspective of this operation. These professionals were like the rock stars of their time, wielding knives and natron instead of guitars and glitter. Now, the process itself. Not for the faint-hearted. First on the to-do list was removing the brain. Forget the elegant surgical precision you might expect. This was more like a home improvement project gone wrong. The brain was typically yanked out through the nose using a hook, a method that's about as pleasant as it sounds. Why the brain? Because, contrary to modern belief, the Egyptians didn't think much of it. The heart was the star of the show, thought to be the seat of intelligence and emotion, and was left happily nesting in the chest cavity. Once the brain was history, the embalmers moved on to the internal organs. These were carefully removed and stored in canopic jars, each jar protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. It's a bit like having your own set of Tupperware, but with divine guardianship. The organs were believed to be needed in the afterlife, though apparently the brain didn't make the cut. Go figure. With the guts out of the way, it was time for the desiccation process. This is where our old buddy natron comes back into play. The body would be covered in this all-purpose miracle powder for about 40 days, turning it into a human raisin. And here's where we get to the economics. Such a painstaking process didn't come cheap. Depending on the quality of the mummification, you could be looking at a cost equivalent to several years' wages for a skilled laborer. For the elite, no expense was spared, with gold, jewels, and the finest linen used to wrap the body. Meanwhile, your average Joe might have to settle for a discount package, less natron, more natural decay. The entire process took about 70 days from start to finish, and during this time, the embalmers worked their magic in special facilities known as waybert, or pure places. These were a cross between a workshop and a temple, where the dead were treated to a post-mortem spa day. But don't be fooled by the serene name. The reality was a bustling hub of activity, with embalmers, priests, and grieving families all jostling for space. And here's the kicker. While the process itself was steeped in spiritual significance, it was also a booming business. The embalmers' guilds wielded significant power, controlling the knowledge and resources needed for mummification. This wasn't just about preparing bodies. It was about maintaining a lucrative enterprise. The temples, too, played their part, as they held the keys to both the economic and spiritual coffers. Every mummified body fed into this complex economic machine, reinforcing the temple's influence and keeping the embalmers in business. For the pharaohs and the elite, mummification was a statement of status, a final, elaborate flex to remind everyone of their divine right to rule, even from beyond the grave. And while we might chuckle at the thought of eternal life wrapped in linen, for the ancient Egyptians, this was serious business. The afterlife was not a leisurely stroll through paradise, but a journey fraught with trials, and you better believe they planned to be well dressed for the occasion. So next time you see a mummy in a museum or a movie, remember that beneath those layers of linen lies a world of economic intrigue and social ambition. It's a reminder that death, like life, was governed by the same forces: power, prestige, and of course, a hefty purse. And while the romantic image of the mummy endures, the reality is far more complex and, dare I say, fascinating. Because let's face it, nothing says eternal life quite like a well-preserved corpse wrapped in the trappings of wealth and power. And speaking of wealth and power, let's not forget who footed the bill for all this afterlife prep. The cost of mummification was a burden or privilege borne by the family of the deceased. In a society where the average worker might earn a few deben a month, a unit of weight and currency that was as much about barter as it was about coinage, affording a top-tier embalming was a sign of serious financial clout. For the middle class, options included a more minimalist approach, with fewer ornate trappings but still enough to ensure a decent shot at the afterlife. This sliding scale of mummification mirrored the social hierarchy, offering a sobering reminder that even in death, the rich had it better. Yet amid this economic spectacle, there was genuine belief at play. The Egyptians weren't just throwing money at a funeral director, they were investing in eternity. The rituals, the offerings, the carefully wrapped bodies, all were expressions of faith in an afterlife that promised rewards commensurate with one's earthly deeds and preparations. It's a poignant testament to the human desire for continuity, for a narrative that extends beyond the grave. So, while we can poke fun at the practicalities, the nose hooks, the natron baths, the canopic jars with their eternally vigilant gods, the heart of mummification lies in its reflection of what it means to be human. It's a story of hope, commerce, and the ever-present quest for immortality. And as we unravel the layers of this ancient practice, we're reminded that history, much like a mummy, is complex and multifaceted, with each layer revealing yet another fascinating tale. So there you have it. The ancient Egyptians were the ultimate overachievers in the afterlife department. But if you thought they reserved their meticulous mummification and ritualistic flair just for humans, think again. Enter stage left. The animal kingdom, where cats, crocodiles, and ibises were not just pets, but sacred beings, each with a VIP ticket to the embalming party. Let's start with the feline stars of the show. Cats, or Mao as they were known in ancient Egypt, were practically celebrities. They were the furry manifestation of the goddess Bastet, protector of home and family. Picture this: a society where a cat lounging in your living room wasn't just shedding on your papyrus scrolls, but was also a divine sentinel, keeping the household safe from evil spirits. It's like having a mystical Roomba that also naps in sunbeams. But the Egyptians weren't just content with purring guardians. Oh no, they took it up a notch with the whole mummification shebang. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of mummified cats, often buried in catacombs dedicated solely to these whiskered deities. It's like an ancient version of a cat cafe, minus the lattes and Instagrammers. The logistics, though, were as mind-boggling as a cat trying to fit into a box half its size. Imagine the sheer scale. Thousands of cats, all meticulously wrapped and interred, a testament to their sacred status and the Egyptians' penchant for going overboard. Now let's talk numbers. The Bubastean catacombs in Saqqara, for instance, are estimated to have housed over 4 million mummified cats. 4 million. That's like every cat meme on the internet brought to life, and then some. Why so many, you ask? Well, mummifying a cat was not just an act of reverence. It was a booming business. Pilgrims would purchase these mummified cats as offerings to Bastet. It's the ancient equivalent of buying a candle at a cathedral. Only this candle had claws and a penchant for chasing laser beams. Speaking of claws, let's not forget the crocodiles. Yes, the Egyptians also had a soft spot for these toothy reptiles. The god Sobek, often depicted with a crocodile head, was believed to control the waters of the Nile and ensure fertile lands. So naturally, crocs got the mummy treatment too. The logistics here were downright Jurassic. Ever try wrapping a crocodile in linen? It's not exactly like swaddling a baby. Yet somehow, the Egyptians managed to mummify these scaly beasts. often complete with fake eyes and painted scales to ensure they looked their best in the afterlife. Sobek's temple at Kom Ombo is a treasure trove of these crocodile mummies. Archaeologists have found everything from full-grown adults to tiny baby crocs, lovingly preserved in a mix of natron and resin. And here's the kicker. These mummified crocodiles were often used as votive offerings, a sort of thank you to Sobek for, not flooding the fields or devouring your livestock. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about devotion. There was a hefty dose of pragmatism involved. Crocodile mummification was a cottage industry, employing embalmers, craftsmen, and traders. It was an economic engine, churning out religious souvenirs for the devout. Think of it as the ancient world's version of the tourist trap, complete with gift shops selling mummified reptiles instead of I Heart Egypt t-shirts. And then there were the ibises, sacred to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. These birds had an uncanny knack for looking wise, probably because they were often depicted with a scroll or a scribe's palette. I mean, who doesn't want a bird that can do your taxes or pen a sonnet? The ibis mummification process was something to behold. Thousands of these birds were bred in temple aviaries, specifically for the purpose of being mummified and offered to Thoth. It's like they were born with a divine purpose, albeit a rather grim one. The ibis necropolis at Tuna El Jebel is a testament to this practice, with millions of mummified ibises unearthed over the years. The sheer scale is staggering, akin to a feathered assembly line designed to churn out sacred offerings by the thousands. Each bird was ritually prepared, wrapped in linen, and sealed in pots or wooden boxes, often alongside a bronze or clay figure of the bird, as if one ibis wasn't enough to get Thoth's attention. Let's pause for a moment and consider the economics here. The temples, the breeding, the mummification process, this wasn't just some religious exercise. It was a full-blown industry. The demand for mummified animals fueled a supply chain that employed countless workers and bolstered the local economy. It's as if the divine realm was subsidizing the earthly one, where faith met finance in a symbiotic dance. But as always, reality bites. While we might romanticize these practices as acts of profound devotion, the truth is a bit more gritty. The mass production of animal mummies often involved shortcuts. Think assembly line embalming, where the quality sometimes took a backseat to quantity. Archaeologists have discovered bundles of linen that, upon closer inspection, contain nothing more than a few bones or even just feathers. Fakes, if you will, designed to keep up with demand. It's like discovering your artisanal cheese is actually processed cheese food. So, while the image of a perfectly mummified cat or crocodile might tug at the heartstrings, the reality was often less picturesque. The industry was as cutthroat as any, with competition fierce and ethics occasionally taking a backseat to profit. It's a stark reminder that even in a world steeped in divine imagery, earthly desires still held sway. And yet, despite the sometimes dubious practices, the underlying belief persisted. The Egyptians genuinely revered these animals, seeing them as earthly vessels for divine powers. The rituals, the mummies, the offerings, they were all part of an intricate tapestry that wove together faith, economy, and social order. It's a testament to the complexity of human belief, where the sacred and the pragmatic coexist, sometimes uneasily, but always inextricably linked. In the end, the story of animal mummification in ancient Egypt is one of both reverence and realism. It's about a society striving to connect with the divine, even as it navigated the practicalities of daily life. It's a tale of sacred creatures and economic imperatives, where the line between devotion and commerce was as fluid as the Nile itself. And as we unravel this history, we're reminded once again that the past, much like a mummified crocodile, is full of surprises, some awe-inspiring, others a bit more sobering, but all undeniably fascinating. As we leave the world of sacred animals behind, we're about to dive deeper into the mechanics of Egyptian belief systems. The stage is set for the next chapter, where we'll explore how these rituals and practices shaped not just individual lives, but the very fabric of ancient Egyptian society. Hold onto your canopic jars, because this journey is far from over. As we step away from the animal kingdom and their linen-wrapped legacies, let's zoom out to see the broader tapestry of ancient Egyptian rituals, woven with threads of faith, power, and a hint of showbiz flair. These practices, which might seem a touch eccentric through our modern lens, were not just religious duties, but also savvy exercises in public relations. Picture the pharaohs and priests as the ultimate influencers of their time, wielding rituals as both spiritual offerings and strategic maneuvers to keep the populace in line. It's like the original social media strategy, except instead of hashtags, they had hieroglyphs and hordes of devoted followers. Take the annual drowning of the Pharaoh ceremony, for instance. It wasn't just a splashy religious rite. It was a masterclass in optics. By emerging from the Nile, the Pharaoh reaffirmed their divine status and reinforced their authority over both nature and the people. In a land where the river was the life-giving artery, this ritual was the ultimate flex, a reminder to everyone in the kingdom that their ruler could navigate chaos and emerge victorious in every sense of the word. Talk about a power move. But let's not kid ourselves. These ceremonies were as much about maintaining control as they were about devotion. The pharaohs, keenly aware of their precarious position atop the social pyramid, used these rituals to broadcast their divine favor and, by extension, their right to rule. It was political theater at its finest, a way to ensure that the populace saw them not just as human rulers, but as gods in human form. It's akin to a CEO holding a flashy press conference to reassure shareholders that everything is under control, even if the market suggests otherwise. Economically, these grand displays were both a drain and a boon. The temples acting as the epicenters for these rituals were not just sacred spaces, but economic powerhouses. They controlled the production and distribution of natron, oils, and even the mummified animals that were integral to these ceremonies. Every ritual, every offering, was a transaction feeding into the temple's coffers, ensuring that the spiritual economy thrived alongside the tangible one. It's like buying a ticket to a Broadway show. You're not just paying for the spectacle, but also fueling an entire industry behind the scenes. Now, let's talk about the myth versus the reality. To many, ancient Egypt conjures images of golden tombs and mystical rites, but the truth is far less glamorous. Sure, the elite bathed in luxury, but for the average Egyptian, life was a daily grind of survival, with religion offering a semblance of order in a chaotic world. The romantic notion of a perfumed paradise glosses over the gritty realities of a society constantly at the mercy of the Nile's whims, where disease and hard labor were constant companions. It's like thinking of medieval knights as chivalrous heroes without acknowledging the mud and plague of the Middle Ages. And yet, these myths endure, captivating our imaginations and filling museums with eager visitors. Why? Part of the allure lies in the sheer audacity of it all. The idea that a civilization could construct such monumental structures and intricate belief systems with nothing more than rudimentary tools and a lot of manpower. But there's also a deeper, more human reason. The Egyptians remind us of our own desire for legacy, for leaving a mark that transcends the mundane realities of everyday life. It's the same impulse that drives someone to write a novel, build a business, or, in modern-day terms, craft the perfect Instagram post. So, how do these ancient practices impact us today? For one, they offer a fascinating lens through which to view the interplay of power, faith, and economics. They show us that, much like now, ancient leaders understood the value of spectacle and narrative in maintaining control. And while we might chuckle at their peculiarities, nose hooks, symbolic drownings, and all, the essence of their endeavors isn't so alien. After all, who among us hasn't engaged in a little theatricality to make a point or win an argument? In the end, the legacy of ancient Egyptian rituals is a testament to the enduring quest for meaning, both in life and beyond. It's a reminder that the past, much like a well-preserved mummy, holds layers of complexity waiting to be unraveled. As we peel back these layers, we find a civilization that, despite its oddities, shares our fundamental desires. The pursuit of order in chaos, the need for connection with the divine, and the hope that our stories, no matter how embellished, will outlast us. And perhaps, in understanding their rituals, we can better comprehend our own, recognizing that though the trappings may change, the human heart remains much the same. As you drift off to sleep, cradled by these tales of ancient wonders, remember that history, like a good bedtime story, is full of intrigue, lessons, and a fair bit of magic. Sweet dreams, and may your own adventures be as epic as those of the pharaohs, minus the nose, hooks, and crocodiles. The Inca Empire didn't start with grandiose ambitions or glittering palaces. It began as a rather unassuming band of folks in the highlands of Peru, probably just hoping to get through the day without freezing their llamas off. Picture it. The 12th century, the setting is the Andean highlands, and a small group of people who would later call themselves the Inca were just getting their act together. They weren't thinking empire yet. They were more concerned with survival and maybe a little bit of local domination. Fast forward a few centuries, and these same people would be ruling an empire that stretched over 2,500 miles, from modern-day Colombia down to the tip of Chile. So, what happened? Well, let's just say some seriously ambitious leadership and a bit of luck in the right place, right time department. Now in the 15th century, enter Pachacuti, the 9th Sapa Inca, a title which, by the way, translates to something like transformer of the earth. No pressure, right? Pachacuti was not your typical leader. Under his rule, the Inca went from just another tribe to the big kids on the Andean block. In fact, within a mere 30 years, Pachacuti turned their modest kingdom into an empire, using a blend of military muscle and cunning political strategy that would make Machiavelli nod in approval. But let's not get too cozy with the idea of a peaceful expansion, shall we? The story of the Inca is often wrapped in this romantic notion of a gentle empire spreading harmony and goodwill over the Andes like some pre-Columbian Woodstock. In reality, Pachacuti and his successors were more like the corporate raiders of their day. They had a knack for bringing people into the fold, whether those people liked it or not. And when diplomacy didn't cut it, they were more than happy to let their armies do the talking. The Incas were master builders, not just in stone, but in society. Their expansion strategy was like the original game of Monopoly, but with less boardwalk and more bloodshed. They'd roll into a region, assess the local power dynamics, and then either negotiate or conquer. The local leaders would be offered a choice. Join us and keep some of your privileges, or resist, and well, enjoy the view from a much less comfortable position. The clever bit. The Incas were pros at using a carrot and stick approach. They de-integrate local elites into their administrative structure, giving them a stake in the new regime. But they'd also move conquered peoples around the empire to disrupt any potential rebellions, a tactic known as mitma. By the time Pachacuti's expansion plans were in full swing, the Inca Empire had covered more territory than the Roman Empire at its peak. That's about 2,500 miles along the Andes, a feat that's jaw-dropping when you consider they did it all without the wheel, iron tools, or a single horse. Talk about a DIY project on steroids. Pachacuti's empire building wasn't just about brute force, though. It was also about intelligent governance. The Incas divided their empire into 4 regions, known as sayas, each with its own governor, but all roads led back to Cusco, the navel of the world. Cusco was the beating heart of the empire, with its roads and communication systems radiating out like the spokes of a wheel. And speaking of roads, the Incas were the original road warriors. They constructed an extensive network of roads and bridges, totaling over 24,000 miles, which facilitated communication, trade, and, of course, rapid troop movement. It's like they were running the world's most efficient version of Amazon Prime, minus the drones and 2-day delivery promises. Of course, the Inca had their own brand of propaganda to keep the empire ticking. The emperor was seen as a divine figure, the son of the sun god Inti, a celestial endorsement that made Roman emperors with their divine status claims look like amateurs. This divine status wasn't just for show. It was a powerful tool that helped maintain order and loyalty throughout the empire. After all, Who's going to argue with a guy who's got the sun itself backing him up? But let's be real, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. For every bit of savvy diplomacy and strategic planning, there was often a hefty dose of brutality. The Inca were more than willing to use force to achieve their goals, and they weren't shy about it. Conquered peoples were often subjected to Inca laws and customs, which sometimes meant adopting the Quechua language or worshipping the Inca pantheon. And if you were really unlucky, you might find yourself on the wrong end of a ritual sacrifice. The Incas, like many civilizations of the time, believed in the power of sacrificial offerings to appease their gods. Because, really, nothing says devotion like a good, old-fashioned human sacrifice. In the end, the Inca Empire was a testament to what sheer determination, strategic genius, and a touch of divine PR can achieve. It was a complex tapestry of cultures woven together under the rule of a single dynasty, and while their methods were sometimes harsh, they were undeniably effective. So, the next time you hear someone romanticizing the peaceful Inca, remember that behind every great empire, there's often a trail of not-so-peaceful conquests. So, what happens when you run an empire that spans over 2,500 miles without a single coin jangling in your pocket? Well, welcome to the Inca economy, a system that laughs in the face of currency and instead relies on a sophisticated web of reciprocity, labor, and good old-fashioned resource management. Imagine an empire that thrived on barter and labor taxes, a place where your worth was measured not in gold, but in what you could contribute to the community. Sounds kind of refreshing in today's world of credit scores and inflation rates, doesn't it? First off, let's talk agriculture. The Incas were absolute maestros when it came to farming, and they had to be, given the less-than-ideal real estate they occupied. The Andes aren't exactly known for their flat, fertile plains. Instead, the Incas turned every mountain and hill into a potential breadbasket with their ingenious terrace farming techniques. Picture vast staircases carved into the mountainside, each step a field of crops. These terraces not only prevented soil erosion, but also created microclimates, allowing for a variety of crops to be cultivated. We're talking about potatoes, maize, quinoa, you know, all the good stuff. And if you're wondering why your quinoa salad is so trendy, thank the Incas. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they managed all this without a single copper coin. The secret source of the Inca economy was the concept of Aini, a system of mutual aid and reciprocity. In simple terms, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It was a culture where everyone pitched in for the greater good. If your neighbor needed help planting their crops, you'd be there. And when it was your turn, you'd have a whole crew by your side. This wasn't just a feel-good community effort. It was a vital component of survival in the harsh Andean environment. For the Incas, work wasn't just a way to make a living, it was a civic duty. Enter meter, the labor tax system. Instead of paying taxes with money, you paid with your time and effort. Every able-bodied person had to contribute labor to the state, whether it was building roads, constructing temples, or working on state farms. It was a bit like jury duty, but with a lot more heavy lifting. And while this might sound exploitative, it was actually a way to ensure that the empire functioned smoothly. Everyone played a part in maintaining the infrastructure that kept the wheels turning, or in this case, the llamas walking. Ah, llamas, the unsung heroes of the Inca Empire. These woolly beasts were the Incas' version of a minivan. They were essential for transporting goods across those endless mountain roads. Imagine a llama caravan loaded with everything from textiles to dried fish, trotting over suspension bridges that would make Indiana Jones sweat. Llamas could carry about 50 to 75 pounds each, and with no wheels or horses in sight, they were the backbone of Inca logistics. Plus, they provided wool for clothing, and on less fortunate days, meat. Talk about multitasking. Now, before we get too misty-eyed over this community-focused utopia, let's peel back the curtain a bit. The Inca social structure was rigidly hierarchical, a pyramid scheme where you definitely didn't want to be at the bottom. At the top was the Sapa Inca, the divine emperor, followed by the nobility, who, let's be honest, probably didn't spend much time on the terraces. Below them were the commoners, who made up the vast majority of the population and shouldered most of the labor burden. You see, while the system was efficient, it was also a bit of a raw deal for those at the bottom rung. The promise of mutual aid and reciprocity was sometimes more of a one-way street, benefiting the upper echelons more than the farmers sweating it out in the fields. And then there's the myth of the benevolent Inca rulers, which could use a little debunking. While it's true that the Incas provided for their people in times of need, distributing food from state storehouses during famines, for instance, their rule could be harsh and uncompromising. The expectation of absolute loyalty meant that dissent was not exactly tolerated. Fail to meet your labor quota or challenge the Sapa Inca's authority, and you might find yourself relocated to a less desirable part of the empire courtesy of the Mitma system. It was a way to quash potential uprisings by scattering potentially rebellious groups. Not exactly a gentle hand of governance, if you ask me. Yet, despite the rigid hierarchy and occasional coercion, the Inca economy thrived. Their ability to manage resources and labor so effectively allowed them to sustain a vast empire in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. They turned adversity into opportunity, mastering their landscape with an expertise that would make modern engineers nod in respect. The Incas may not have had a Wall Street, but their economic system was a finely tuned machine that kept the empire humming, from the peaks of the Andes to the coastal valleys. So next time you marvel at a perfectly engineered terrace or enjoy a bowl of quinoa, remember the Incas. They were more than just a people with a penchant for golden sun temples. They were economic innovators, agricultural pioneers, and masters of an empire that thrived without a single minted coin. And while their methods were sometimes as brutal as the mountains they called home, their legacy is one of resilience and ingenuity, a testament to what humans can achieve when they put their collective minds to it. Now, let's talk about those legendary Inca engineering feats that have left modern architects scratching their heads and wondering if they missed a memo. We're diving into the story of Machu Picchu and the sprawling road network that knit the empire together like the world's most ambitious patchwork quilt. First up, Machu Picchu, a name that instantly conjures up images of misty mountaintops and dramatic stone terraces. It's like the poster child for ancient world meets Instagram. But let's peel back that postcard-perfect image. Machu Picchu wasn't just a pretty face. It was a masterpiece of engineering and strategic acumen, built around 1450 under the rule of Pachacuti. Yes, him again. This city was perched 7,970 feet above sea level. It's almost as if the Incas wanted a place where they could literally keep an eye on everything and everyone. Now, here's the kicker. Machu Picchu was constructed without mortar. That's right. Those stones fit together like a 3D jigsaw puzzle with no glue. The Incas used a technique called ashlar masonry, which involves cutting stones so precisely that they fit together without any binding agent. This wasn't just a testament to their craftsmanship, it was a seismic safety measure. This technique allowed the structures to withstand the frequent earthquakes that rocked the region. It's like they invented a prehistoric version of shock absorbers. Top that, modern urban planners. The city itself was likely a royal estate, a sort of mountain getaway for the Inca elite. But it was also a symbol of power and control. It demonstrated the Incas' ability to conquer not just people, but the landscape itself. And while we're all for a bit of nature-loving, let's not pretend this was some harmonious commune with the environment. The Incas were reshaping the earth to suit their needs, and Machu Picchu was a bold statement that said, "We own this mountain." Now, let's shift gears to the Inca road network, a 24,000-mile web that would make any modern GPS system weep with envy. This was no mere collection of dirt paths. We're talking about meticulously planned roads paved with stone, complete with drainage systems and retaining walls. They spanned deserts, mountains, and jungles, connecting the empire from Quito in the north to Santiago in the south. These roads were the arteries that pumped life into the empire, allowing for the swift movement of armies, goods, and information. And let's not forget the suspension bridges. Made from grass and woven by hand, these bridges could stretch up to 150 feet. They were rebuilt annually by local communities in a grand display of teamwork that would put most team-building exercises to shame. It's one thing to talk about cooperation, it's another to see it in action over a gorge. But here, that's where we take a step back and question the narrative. There's a tendency to romanticize the Inca as some sort of eco-friendly utopian society. In reality, their engineering feats were as much about domination as they were about connectivity. Roads and bridges weren't just handy for trade. They were crucial for moving troops quickly to crush any hint of rebellion. It's one thing to integrate a new region through diplomacy. It's quite another to roll in with an army when the locals get feisty. The roads also facilitated the complex system of runners known as chasquis, who relayed messages across the empire with the efficiency of a pre-Columbian FedEx. These guys were the original marathoners, sprinting between relay stations to ensure the swift transmission of information. It's a romantic image, sure, but it also underscores the importance of maintaining tight control over such a vast territory. Information was power, and the Incas made sure it traveled faster than descent. Speaking of romantic images, let's address the myth of the Inca living in perfect harmony with nature. Yes, they were skilled at manipulating their environment, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking they were gentle caretakers of the earth. Their terrace farming and road construction, while impressive, were about survival and expansion, not environmental stewardship. They were changing the landscape to fit their imperial ambitions, not the other way around. In the end, the Inca engineering marvels were a blend of necessity, strategy, and a bit of imperial flair. They were about asserting control over both the land and its people, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Whether you see them as eco-friendly visionaries or masterful manipulators, there's no denying that the Inca left a legacy that continues to captivate and confound us today. So, as we marvel at the stone terraces of Machu Picchu or the vast road network that once crisscrossed the Andes, let's remember that these were not just feats of engineering. They were bold statements of power. The Incas may have been gone for centuries, but their story is etched in stone and woven into the very fabric of the Andes, a testament to a civilization that dared to carve its own destiny out of the rugged landscape. And as we continue to unearth the secrets of their empire, one thing is clear. The Inca were masters of their world, and their story is far from over. But before we get too carried away with tales of stone-carved glory and imperial logistics, let's pivot to something a bit more ethereal, or should I say, divine. Because if there's one thing the Inca had in spades, besides terraces and a knack for empire building, it was gods, and lots of them. Imagine a pantheon that rivaled anything the Greeks or Romans could conjure, but with a distinctly Andean flair. At the top of this celestial ladder was Inti, the sun god, shining brighter than 1,000 neon signs in Times Square. To the Incas, Inti wasn't just a fiery ball in the sky. He was the lifeblood of their civilization, providing warmth, light, and most importantly, a divine endorsement of their rule. After all, when the emperor claims to be the son of the sun god, it's hard to argue with his authority. So next time you're basking in a sunbeam, spare a thought for the Incas who saw it as direct approval from their celestial overlord. But Inti wasn't ruling the heavens alone. Joining him was a veritable who's who of deities, each with their own domain and set of responsibilities. There was Pachamama, the earth goddess, a nurturing figure who was probably the most beloved, as she was responsible for making sure those terraces stayed fruitful. Then there's Viracocha, the creator god, who allegedly conjured the world out of nothing, like a cosmic magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. And let's not forget Mama Quilla, goddess of the moon, whose silvery glow guided nighttime rituals and agricultural cycles. Incan spirituality was a rich tapestry woven with festivals, rituals, and a healthy dose of superstition. Now, that's where things get interesting, and a bit dark. Because while the Incas certainly loved a good festival, complete with music, dance, and copious amounts of chicha, a fermented corn beverage that was the Incan equivalent of a cold brew, their spiritual practices weren't just about celebrating life. They were also about appeasing the gods in ways that would make even the most ardent partygoer pause. Let's talk about kapakocha. This wasn't your garden variety ceremonial offering. Kapakocha was a ritual of sacrifice, a solemn affair meant to ensure the gods' favor. And we're not talking about tossing a few coins into a wishing well. The Incas believed in offering the finest they had, which sometimes meant the ultimate sacrifice. Human lives. Typically, these were children, chosen for their purity and beauty, seen as the best possible gifts to the gods. It's jarring, right? The same society that engineered monumental roadways also engaged in these stark rituals. But why, you ask? Why go to such extremes? Well, the Incas believed that the balance of the world depended on maintaining the favor of their deities. Sacrifices were seen as a way to communicate with the divine, to avert disasters, or to ensure a bountiful harvest. In an empire that stretched across diverse and often harsh climates, keeping the gods happy was as much about survival as it was about spirituality. These sacrificial ceremonies were meticulously planned and deeply symbolic. Children selected for kapakocha were treated with the utmost care in the months leading up to the sacrifice. They were dressed in fine clothing, given special diets, and led on long pilgrimages to sacred sites. It's a haunting image, and one that underscores the complex duality of Incan spirituality, a culture that celebrated life and community, but was also deeply intertwined with rituals of death. And while we're on the topic of festivals, let's dive into one of the most famous, Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun. Held in the heart of Cusco, this annual celebration was a tribute to Inti and marked the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Think of it as the Incan equivalent of New Year's Eve, but with more llamas and fewer countdowns. Thousands would gather to witness the pageantry, which included elaborate costumes, dances, and offerings. It was a time of renewal and reaffirmation of the bond between the emperor and the sun god. But let's not romanticize it too much. Behind the vibrant colors and music was a stark reminder of the empire's hierarchical structure. The emperor, as the living embodiment of Inti's will, was the star of the show, while the common folk watched from the sidelines, reminded of their place in the cosmic order. It was a spectacle of power as much as it was a celebration of faith. So, while the Incas are often portrayed as peaceful sun worshippers, their spiritual life was anything but one-dimensional. It was a complex interplay of reverence, ritual, and a touch of coercion. The Incas understood that to maintain their vast empire, they needed more than roads and rulers. They needed divine backing. And if that required the occasional sacrifice, well, that was the price of keeping the cosmic balance in check. As we continue to unravel the threads of Incan spirituality, it's clear that this was a society that embraced the full spectrum of human experience. From joyous festivals to somber rituals, the Incas lived their lives with one eye on the heavens and the other on the earth, always seeking to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. So, while we might not envy their harsher practices, there's no denying the depth and complexity of their spiritual world. A world where gods walked among men, and every sunrise was a reminder of the delicate balance they fought to maintain. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these beliefs shaped everyday life in the empire, from the marketplace to the battlefield. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the lives of the Incas, a people whose legacy continues to illuminate the mysteries of the Andes and beyond. And so, as the Incas lived with one foot in the mystical and the other on the rugged Andean slopes, a new chapter was about to unfold, a chapter not pennied by them, but by a group of uninvited guests. Enter Francisco Pizarro, a man whose resume included pig herding and, rather unfortunately for the Incas, a knack for conquest. In 1532, Pizarro and his band of about 168 Spanish conquistadors arrived on the Peruvian shores, armed with steel, gunpowder, and a healthy dose of ambition. To say the Incas were caught off guard would be the understatement of the millennium. Imagine being in the heart of a thriving empire, and out of nowhere, a handful of armored strangers show up, claiming divine right with the same audacity as a tourist demanding gluten-free options at a steakhouse. But there was more to the Inca downfall than just a few swashbuckling Europeans with a penchant for treasure. The empire was already teetering on the edge, rocked by internal strife that would have made any soap opera scriptwriter proud. You see, the Incas were in the middle of a civil war. The death of the Sapa Inca Huayna Capac in 1527 had left a power vacuum quicker than you can say succession crisis. His sons, Atahualpa and Huascar, were locked in a bitter battle for the throne, with Atahualpa eventually claiming victory. But this victory came at a steep cost, leaving the empire divided and vulnerable. It's the classic case of sibling rivalry taken to an imperial scale. Imagine Game of Thrones, but with fewer dragons and more llamas. Amidst this chaos, disease played the role of a silent conqueror. Smallpox and other European diseases had already swept through the continent, courtesy of earlier Spanish explorers. These invisible invaders ravaged the native populations, decimating communities and leaving the Incas weakened before a single conquistador had set foot in their territory. The irony: the Incas, who had built an empire without a single wheel, were brought to their knees by microscopic foes they couldn't even see. And then there was the allure of gold, a shiny, seductive siren song that drew Pizarro and his men like moths to a flame. The Spanish were utterly convinced that the New World was paved with gold, and they weren't about to let a little thing like diplomacy get in the way of their treasure hunt. For the Incas, gold was a symbol of the sun, a sacred metal used in rituals and adornments. For Pizarro, it was the jackpot he had been chasing since he first set sail. The confrontation between Pizarro and Atahualpa at the Battle of Cajamarca was less a battle and more a massacre. The Spanish, armed with guns and steel, captured Atahualpa and held him for ransom, demanding a room filled with gold as his price. And the Incas, believing in the power of reciprocity and ransom, complied. Over 24 tons of gold and silver were delivered, an amount that would have made even the most extravagant of empires blush. But Pizarro, proving that a deal with a conquistador is about as reliable as a sandcastle in a storm, executed Atahualpa anyway. It was a brutal reminder that the rules of engagement had changed, and the Incas were playing catch-up in a game they didn't even know they were part of. With Atahualpa's death, the spine of the Inca Empire was effectively snapped. Pizarro marched into Cusco, the heart of the empire, with an ease that belied the centuries of effort it had taken to build. The Incas, once masters of the Andes, were now subjects of the Spanish crown, their lands divided, and their traditions crushed beneath the weight of European colonization. But let's not wrap this up with a neat little bow of doom and gloom. The Inca legacy didn't just vanish into the mist of history. Far from it. The echoes of their achievements still resonate today, from the stone terraces that cling to mountain sides with stubborn determination to the Quechua language, still spoken by millions across the Andes. Machu Picchu stands as a testament to their architectural genius, drawing visitors from around the globe who come to marvel at the city in the clouds. And while the Spanish conquest is often framed as the end of the Inca, it's more accurate to see it as a transformation. The Incas didn't disappear. Their culture adapted, survived, and integrated into the New World Order. The myths of the benevolent Inca rulers and the harmonious empire might be just that, myths. But the real story is one of resilience, innovation, and a complex society that thrived in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. As we reflect on the Inca Empire, let's remember it not just for its tragic downfall, but for its enduring spirit. The Incas have left a legacy that continues to captivate us, a story of human ingenuity that defies the odds and leaves us pondering the possibilities of what was and what might have been. Whether you see them as architects of an ancient wonderland or victims of historical circumstance, one thing is clear. The Incas carved a legacy into the Andes that still stands strong, a reminder that history is never just black and white. It's a tapestry of triumphs and tragedies woven together by the hands of time. And that tapestry, my friends, is anything but ordinary. The sun peeks over the horizon, slicing through the salty morning mist with all the subtlety of a cutlass through stale bread. You're on the deck of a pirate ship, circa 1718, anchored somewhere in the Caribbean, a sea as rich with legends as it is with treasure-laden Spanish galleons. Your eyes blink open to the symphony of groaning timber, creaking ropes, and the occasional squawk from a seagull who's clearly got its own treasure hunt in mind. This is no Disneyland ride. It's gritty, grimy, and gloriously alive. Stretching out on your makeshift hammock, you shake off the night's dreams, probably involving a dramatic sword fight or a chest full of gold doubloons, and join the swaying rhythm of the ship. Welcome to your morning routine, which, let's be honest, is more about survival than self-care. First things first, make sure you're not stepping on the toes of the hierarchy. The captain might be the face of this floating operation, but it's the quartermaster who really runs the show. Think of him as the pirate HR manager with a penchant for violence. He ensures the loot is shared, disputes are settled, and the ship doesn't descend into chaos. Well, more chaos than usual. Now, about that loot. Here's a nugget of truth to tuck in your bandana. Pirates weren't just in it for the adventure. They were in it for the money. The economic allure was real, my friend. While a naval sailor might toil away for a paltry wage of £19 a year, a pirate could make that much, and more, from a single successful raid. It's the 18th century equivalent of leaving a soul-sucking office job to strike it rich in Silicon Valley, minus the stock options, and plus a lot more scurvy. Stumble up to the main deck, and your nostrils are greeted by the smell of sea and sweat, all natural sense of pirate life. The ship's cook, if you can call him that, is dishing out breakfast. Gruel, maybe some hardtack if you're lucky, and a swig of rum to wash it down. Forget the food pyramid. On this ship, it's more like a food plank. As you eat, take a moment to gaze at the fluttering flag overhead. Ah, the infamous Jolly Roger, right. Not quite. While pop culture paints a picture of skulls and crossbones, the reality was as varied as a pirate's mood swings. Some flags were red, signaling no mercy would be shown, psychological warfare at its finest. Others bore gruesome images designed to chill the bones of any sailor who dared cross paths with you. Pirates understood the art of branding long before Instagram influencers were a thing. Yet, the myth of the Jolly Roger endures, because who doesn't love a good story with a killer logo? But remember, these flags were less about announcing your arrival with style, and more about making sure your prey surrendered without a fight. After all, why waste energy on a battle when a well-timed threat can do the job? As you finish your meal, consider the rules that govern this anarchic world. Surprisingly, pirate ships were more democratic than the lands they terrorized. Decisions were often made by vote, with equal shares of loot for most crew members. Talk about progressive. This wasn't just about fairness, it was practical. Happy pirates are loyal pirates, and in an environment where mutiny is merely a bad day away, keeping the crew content was crucial. So, as you stand on the deck, the sun now fully awake and glinting off the endless ocean, ponder the myths versus the gritty truths of pirate life. It's a world where the promise of freedom dances with the spectre of danger, where the thrill of the chase meets the mundane reality of shipboard life. And somewhere between the two lies your day, a mix of romance and reality, just like the sea beneath you. You pause, momentarily mesmerized by the horizon where the sky kisses the sea. But daydreaming won't keep the ship afloat or your crewmates happy. No, it's time to dive into the nitty-gritty of pirate life, where every day is a balancing act between democracy and discipline, camaraderie and chaos. Welcome to life aboard a pirate ship, where the only constant is the unpredictability of the high seas. Let's start with the daily grind, shall we? Forget the romantic notion of lounging around, sipping grog, and telling tales. The reality is, there's work to be done, and plenty of it. Swabbing the deck might sound mundane, but it's crucial to stop the ship from turning into a floating slip and slide. And trust me, you don't want to be the one who slips overboard. If you think keeping your bedroom tidy is a chore, try doing it on a swaying ship with no vacuum in sight. Next up, sail handling. This isn't your leisurely Sunday sail on the lake. It's a full-blown choreography of ropes and canvas, and every pirate is expected to know the steps. Adjusting sails isn't just about catching the wind, it's about outmaneuvering your foes and making a quick getaway when needed. Imagine it as the original high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where the stakes are your very survival. Now, let's talk navigation. Think you could rely on GPS back then? Ha! You'd be lucky to have a compass that wasn't spinning like a drunk parrot. Pirates relied on the stars, the sun, and sheer gut instinct to find their way. Maps were treasures themselves, often stolen from captured ships and guarded jealously. Make no mistake, the open sea was as much an enemy as any naval ship, and getting lost meant more than just an inconvenience. It was a potential death sentence. Amidst all this toil and turmoil, the pirate code was what held the crew together. It was a set of rules that ensured order and fairness, a pirate constitution, if you will. Every pirate ship had its own code, agreed upon by the crew, with serious consequences for those who broke it. Stealing from the crew meant marooning at best, a bullet at worst. Desertion was a big no-no too, usually resulting in a swift execution if caught. Harsh, absolutely. But in a world where trust was as rare as a calm sea, it was a necessary evil. Yet the pirate code wasn't all about punishment. It had its democratic flair too. Decisions on raids, for instance, were often made by a crew vote. Even the captain could be voted out if he didn't perform. This wasn't some benevolent leadership. It was survival politics. A disgruntled crew was a mutinous crew, and the pirate life didn't come with the luxury of a retirement plan. Now, speaking of captains, let's sail into the murky waters of pirate leadership with none other than the infamous Blackbeard. Real name Edward Teach, Blackbeard's reputation was as fearsome as his appearance. Standing at over 6 feet tall with a wild, tangled beard, sometimes lit with slow-burning fuses for added drama, he was the quintessential pirate villain. But behind the legend was a cunning strategist who knew that fear was his greatest weapon. He captured the frigate Queen Anne's Revenge and turned it into his flagship, blockading the port of Charleston in 1718. His actions were as much about politics as they were about plunder, a reminder that piracy was as strategic as it was violent. Yet even Blackbeard's reign of terror couldn't last forever. The politics of piracy were as turbulent as the tides, with allegiances shifting like sand. Colonial governments, fed up with their inability to control the seas, began to crack down, offering pardons to pirates willing to give up their ways. Blackbeard himself accepted such a pardon, briefly retiring, before returning to piracy. A decision that would ultimately lead to his downfall in a bloody battle against Lieutenant Robert Maynard's forces later in 1718. So, while the allure of the pirate life was real, it was far from idyllic. It was a world of constant hustle, where democracy existed alongside draconian discipline, and every day was a gamble with fate. As you stand on that deck, the sun now high in the sky, remember that the pirate life was as much about survival as it was about swagger. The romance of the sea. Sure, it's there, but it's tangled with the gritty reality of a life lived on the edge of society, where freedom and fear walked hand in hand across the ocean waves. So you're still standing there on the deck, mulling over what you've just learned about pirate life, when the quartermaster starts barking orders. It's time to prepare for an attack on a merchant ship, and let me tell you, this is where the pirate life gets as tense as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Forget the Hollywood version of swashbuckling duels and witty banter. This is raw, nerve-wracking business, fueled by desperation and greed. First up, let's talk tactics. Contrary to popular belief, pirates didn't just sail around, waving their cutlasses and shouting, "Ah!" like actors at a theme park. No, they were strategic masterminds, using cunning plans to outwit their targets. The aim was to intimidate, not annihilate. After all, sinking a ship meant losing the loot. Pirates preferred to cripple a ship's sails with chain shots, effectively stopping it dead in the water. A bit like slashing tires, but on a more nautical scale. Weaponry, too, wasn't all about swords and pistols. Cannons were the real stars of the show, each weighing around a ton and capable of hurling a 24-pound iron ball with the force of a small earthquake. Loading and firing, these beasts was a team effort, requiring a crew who knew their roles as well as an actor knows their lines. And let's not forget the psychological warfare. Flying a red flag, known as the Jolly Roger, was a signal of no quarter, surrender, or face the consequences. This was the 18th century equivalent of a hacker's ransomware threat, and it worked more often than not. Now, let's hit pause on the action to consider the economic context. The Caribbean was a cash cow of the colonial empires, with Spanish, English, and Dutch ships ferrying gold, silver, and goods back to Europe. Piracy was the economic disruptor of its day, akin to a rogue hedge fund manager destabilizing Wall Street. The cost to Caribbean trade was immense, with millions of pounds lost to piracy annually. This wasn't just lost revenue. It was a direct hit on the colonial powers' coffers, fueling geopolitical tensions and spurring naval crackdowns. Back to the ship. As the target looms on the horizon, every pirate is at their post, the air thick with anticipation. The call to arms isn't a rousing speech. It's a terse command that sends the crew scrambling to their stations. The reality of an attack is far from glamorous, more about sweat and fear than heroics. The goal is to get close enough to board the merchant vessel, a maneuver requiring precision and nerves of steel. The boarding itself is chaos incarnate. Pirates swarm the deck like ants on a dropped ice cream cone, using numbers and surprise to overwhelm the merchant crew. The romanticized image of dueling captains, pure fiction. The reality is a brutal, frenzied scuffle where survival is the only prize. The pirates' advantage lies not in superior strength, but in their sheer audacity and the psychological edge of being known as ruthless outlaws. But why take such risks, you ask? Well, the rewards could be staggering. A single haul could translate to a king's ransom, divvied up among the crew. And let's not forget the allure of freedom from the oppressive hierarchies of naval or merchant life. For many, piracy was a tantalizing mix of profit and autonomy, a chance to live by their own rules, however precarious. Yet the cost of this lifestyle was steep. Injuries were common, and medical care was rudimentary at best. Think more saw and rum than Doctor House. And then there's the constant threat of capture. Colonial powers weren't exactly fans of freebooters undermining their trade, and the consequences were severe. Capture often meant a one-way ticket to the gallows, a grim reminder that piracy was a high-stakes game with life-or-death consequences. So, as the dust, or rather, the gunpowder, settles on the deck, take a moment to appreciate the gritty reality of pirate raids. It's a world away from the romantic legends of swashbuckling heroes. Here, the lines between villain and victim blur, painted in shades of desperation and defiance. Each raid is a microcosm of the larger geopolitical chess game playing out in the Caribbean, where the stakes are as high as the seas are deep. And as you stand there, the salty wind whipping through your hair, remember, the pirate life may have been filled with the promise of freedom and fortune, but it was also fraught with peril and uncertainty. It's a tale of daring and duplicity, where the myths are as captivating as the truths are sobering. But don't get too comfortable yet. This story's far from over, and the next chapter promises even more intrigue on the high seas. So there you are, standing amidst the aftermath of a successful raid, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to the air like a stubborn ghost. The once chaotic deck is now a veritable treasure trove, littered with chests bursting at the seams with everything from silver coins to bolts of silk. But don't get too dazzled by the glitter, because now comes the real test of pirate camaraderie, the division of spoils. Think of it as the original office bonus meeting, but with a lot more cutlasses and a lot less HR involvement. Here's how it shakes down. The loot is hauled into a communal pile, a glittering testament to the sweat and blood spent to acquire it. The quartermaster, a man with the authority of a CFO and the swagger of a rock star, takes the helm. His job, to ensure that every pirate gets their fair share, in accordance with the pirate code. And yes, that means even the guy who was seasick the whole time gets a cut. Democracy at its finest. Now, the division itself is a fascinating exercise in pirate economics. The captain usually gets 2 shares for his leadership and strategic prowess. The quartermaster gets 1.5 for his organizational skills, and the rest of the crew get 1 share each. It doesn't sound like much, but consider this. A single raid could net thousands of pounds, and even the lowliest pirate could walk away with enough to make a year's worth of honest wages in just 1 day. Who needs a 401k when you've got that kind of ROI? But let's not romanticize too much. Despite the seemingly egalitarian division, economic disparities still existed aboard a pirate ship. The captain and quartermaster lived a bit more comfortably, with better quarters and a slightly more varied diet. Meanwhile, the average pirate subsisted on hardtack and whatever else could be scrounged up, or swiped from the captain's stash when he wasn't looking. And don't even get me started on the medical care. Ever had a toothache treated with a swig of rum and a rusty pair of pliers? Welcome to pirate dentistry. Beyond the ship, piracy had a significant impact on local economies. Ports like Nassau in the Bahamas became pirate havens, thriving on the influx of stolen goods and the gold-laden pockets of spendthrift buccaneers. These ports were the Vigas of the Caribbean, lawless, lucrative, and a tad bit seedy. Here, pirates could offload their booty to unscrupulous merchants, who in turn sold it back to the very empires from which it was stolen. It was a black market bonanza, a circular economy of theft and trade that lined the pockets of many a port official willing to look the other way. Now, you might be wondering how these pirates justified their less-than-legal lifestyle. The truth is, piracy existed in a legal and moral grey area. During the golden age of piracy, many pirates started as privateers, essentially government-sanctioned pirates, given letters of marque to plunder enemy ships during wartime. It was a slippery slope from privateer to pirate, especially when peace treaties rendered those letters null and void. Faced with a choice between returning to low-paying naval jobs or continuing the lucrative life of piracy, many chose the latter. Can you blame them? It's like being asked to return to your intern's salary after a taste of the CEO's paycheck. But the pirate's life was a gamble, one where the odds were rarely in your favor. Colonial powers were relentless in their pursuit of pirates, driven by both economic losses and the desire to maintain control over their territories. Captured pirates were often tried and executed in public spectacles designed to deter would-be buccaneers. Yet the allure of freedom and fortune was hard to resist, and for many, the risk was worth the reward. So, as you stand there on the deck, the sun dipping below the horizon in a blaze of orange and gold, reflect on the paradox of pirate life. It was a world where the promise of democracy clashed with the harsh reality of economic disparity, where ports thrived on the very lawlessness they were supposed to curb. A life where the moral high ground was as elusive as the horizon itself. And as the sea breeze whispers tales of daring and defiance, remember that piracy was more than just a life of crime. It was a complex tapestry of survival, rebellion, and opportunism, woven into the fabric of the Caribbean's history. The myths may paint a romantic picture, but the truth is as rough and rugged as the seas themselves. So keep your eyes on the horizon and your wits about you. The next chapter of this saga promises even more intrigue and adventure. The sea breeze shifts, and just like that, the narrative of piracy changes course. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink, let's sail away from the Caribbean and explore the legacy of piracy on a global scale. You see, the swashbuckling saga didn't end with the golden age of piracy. It merely transformed, like a sneaky chameleon adapting to new surroundings. By the early 18th century, increased naval patrols were hot on the heels of pirate ships. The British and Spanish navies, armed and eager, were determined to reclaim the oceans. They deployed more ships to protect their trade routes and stomp out the pirate menace. Imagine a game of cat and mouse, but with cannons and cutlasses, and the stakes. Well, they were as high as the masts of a 3-decker ship. But it wasn't just brute force that curtailed piracy. The trade routes themselves began to shift. Colonial powers, in their relentless quest for profit, expanded their empires across the globe. The Indian Ocean and the South China Sea beckoned with promises of untapped riches and new adventures. As trade winds changed direction, so did the pirates, following the scent of opportunity like a shark scenting blood in the water. Yet, as piracy ebbed in the Caribbean, its myths flowed eternally. The romantic image of the pirate endured, becoming larger than life, a grand tale spun from the rough threads of reality. Why? Because there's something inherently captivating about the idea of living outside the law, of carving out your fortune with a sword and a sneer. It's the ultimate anti-establishment fantasy, where the underdog might just win against the towering giants of empire. But let's not get too carried away. The truth of pirate life was far less glamorous than the legends suggest. For every Blackbeard with his flaming beard and fearsome reputation, there were countless nameless pirates who met their end in anonymity. Disease, malnutrition, and the constant threat of capture loomed large. These weren't just men of adventure. They were men of necessity, pushed to piracy by poverty and a lack of opportunities. And yet, here we are, centuries later, still enamored with the swashbuckling, treasure-chasing archetype. It's the power of storytelling, my friend. The myth of the pirate taps into something primal, our desire for freedom, for rebellion, for a life less ordinary. It's a narrative that endures because it speaks to the dreamers and the rebels in us all. As the 18th century waned, so did the age of piracy. The world was changing, with colonial powers consolidating their hold on territories and trade. The Industrial Revolution was on the horizon, promising new technologies, and with them, new ways to control the seas. The age of sail was giving way to steam, and with it, the romantic image of the pirate ship was fading into history. Yet, the pirate legacy persists, woven into the fabric of popular culture. From Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island to Hollywood's Pirates of the Caribbean, the pirate mythos has been reimagined and reinvented countless times. Each retelling adds a new layer to the myth, a fresh coat of paint on the old wooden hull. But why does this legend continue to captivate us? Perhaps it's the allure of the outlaw, the idea that one can live by their own rules in a world that often feels constraining. Or maybe it's the promise of adventure, the thrill of the unknown that calls to the wanderer in our souls. Whatever the reason, pirates remain a potent symbol, a reminder of a time when the world was a vast, untamed expanse ready to be explored. So, as you stand on the deck, the last hues of sunset fading into night reflect on the paradox of piracy. It was a life of danger and desperation, yes, but also one of democracy and daring. A world where men could, for a brief moment, escape the shackles of society and chart their own course across the unending ocean. And as you ponder this legacy, remember that the stories we tell about pirates are more than just tales of treasure and tyranny. They are reflections of our deepest desires and fears, a mirror held up to the human condition. The pirate legend persists because it reminds us of what it means to be free, to live boldly, to seize the day, to sail into the unknown with nothing but hope and a hearty "ah." In the humid cradle of the Mesoamerican jungle, a group of early settlers were busy planting the seeds of what would become one of history's most fascinating civilizations, the Maya. And it all kicked off around 2000 BC. Now, if you're imagining a bunch of folks in loincloths with stone tools, you wouldn't be entirely wrong. But these people were onto something big, something revolutionary. They were the OGs of agriculture in the region, the hipsters of horticulture, if you will. The Maya were about to turn maize, yes, corn, into a culinary rock star. And let me tell you, they did it long before it was cool to put corn in everything from salads to ice creams. But unlike today's farm-to-table trend, which is usually accompanied by a hefty price tag and a rustic menu board, the Maya were doing it out of sheer necessity and genius. They took a wild grass called teosinte and transformed it into the hearty, golden kernels we know today. This was no small feat, involving thousands of years of selective breeding. Talk about patience. Could you imagine waiting that long for your garden to flourish? Early Maya settlements popped up in regions that now form parts of modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They didn't choose their real estate based on beachfront views or school districts, but rather on fertile land and water availability. Now, this might sound like a no-brainer, but the Maya had to constantly negotiate with Mother Nature, who was, frankly, a bit of a diva. Dense jungles and unforgiving terrain made farming challenging, but they were nothing if not resourceful. They practiced slash-and-burn agriculture, which sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, but is actually a technique where they cleared forests by cutting and burning to make way for crops. And then there were the mosquitoes. Imagine trying to build a civilization while constantly swatting away these little bloodsuckers. It's like hosting a picnic in a swamp. But the Maya persevered, probably slathering on whatever ancient bug repellent they could muster. They knew the payoff was worth it. Their early agricultural advancements allowed them to support larger populations, leading to the first sparks of urbanization. Cities like Nakbay and El Mirador began to rise from the jungle floor, complete with massive pyramids that would eventually rival those of Egypt. It's worth noting that while the Nile and the deserts of Egypt had their own challenges, the Maya were dealing with a green hell of sorts. Their environment was lush, but also demanding. The Maya had to contend with seasonal rains that could flood fields and dry seasons that required innovative irrigation systems. This was no weekend gardening project. It was a full-time gig. Yet they thrived, demonstrating an impressive understanding of their environment and an ability to manipulate it to their advantage. And here's where the Maya really set themselves apart. Their society wasn't just about survival. They were thinkers, dreamers, and builders. As they developed their cities, they also began crafting a complex society with distinct social classes, intricate religious practices, and even their own form of writing. All this while Europe was still figuring out how to transition from stone tools to bronze. The Maya were already marking the calendar, literally, with a sophisticated timekeeping system. The romantic notion of the ancient Maya as mystical stargazers and exotic pyramid builders has its allure, but let's not forget the grit behind the glamour. They weren't just sitting around sipping cacao, waiting for inspiration to strike. They were digging, planting, and building with a relentless drive that would see their civilization rise to impressive heights. The Maya knew that if they wanted to stick around, they had to make some tough choices, like which crops to plant, how to rotate them, and how to support the growing human demand. By the way, maize, beans, and squash became the Mesoamerican equivalent of the holy trinity of agriculture. This trio provided vital nutrients and played nicely with each other in the ground, much like a well-rehearsed band at a local gig. This agricultural strategy wasn't just smart, it was genius. It allowed them to build surplus, which in turn fueled trade and supported an increasingly complex society. But let's circle back to maize for a moment, because it truly was their golden child. The Maya's devotion to this crop transcended mere sustenance. It was sacred, intertwined with their mythology and identity. In the Popol Vuh, the Maya's creation myth, humans are fashioned from maize dough. Now, that's a food pyramid to admire. This reverence ensured that every kernel of maize was appreciated, not unlike the way some people worship their morning coffee today. As the Maya civilization began to take shape, it was clear that they were not just surviving but thriving. They were creating a legacy that would echo through the ages. Their settlements evolved into complex city-states, each with its own ruler, ball courts for ceremonial games, and towering temples that touched the sky. It was a testament to human ingenuity, and a reminder that even in the face of sweltering jungles and relentless mosquitoes, greatness can sprout from the most unlikely of places. So next time you're enjoying some corn on the cob or a taco, give a nod to the Maya. They were the ones who turned a wild grass into a staple that would eventually conquer the world. And while the road from humble beginnings to a thriving civilization was anything but easy, the Maya walked it with a determination and flair that remain unmatched. In their world, maize wasn't just a crop. It was life itself, and from it, a civilization was born. But the Maya weren't just about worshipping maize or building towering temples. By the time 250 AD rolled around, they were knee-deep in something even more complex and exhilarating: the rise of city-states. Picture a landscape dotted with burgeoning urban centers, each one trying to outdo the next like ancient skyscrapers in a tropical Manhattan. Tikal and Kapan were among the big players here, both vying for the title of most impressive city, with a passion that would put modern reality TV to shame. Tikal, located in present-day Guatemala, was the New York City of the Maya world. By 600 AD, it was home to around 100,000 people. This was no small feat considering the nearest supermarket was a dense jungle away, and Amazon hadn't yet figured out drone delivery. Tikal's architects didn't just build up, they reached for the stars. Their pyramids stretched over 200 feet tall, rivaling modern 20-story buildings, and were adorned with intricate carvings that told tales of gods, kings, and cosmic events. It was as if they were saying, "Hey, universe, look at what we can do." Now Kapan, nestled in what is now Honduras, had its own flair. While Tikal was all about size and power, Kapan was the art school kid, specializing in stonework and sculpture that could make Michelangelo blush. Around 400 AD, Kapan became a cultural and intellectual hub, where the elite gathered to discuss astronomy, mathematics, and who had the best pyramid. Its rulers weren't just content with high art. They also understood the importance of a good storyline. The kingdom's history was meticulously carved into altars and stelae, offering a running commentary of their achievements, battles, and occasional missteps. But don't think for a second that these city-states were just peaceful art and architecture fairs. Oh no, they were the original Game of Thrones, minus the fire-breathing dragons and questionable family dynamics. Rivalries were fierce, and alliances were as fragile as an ancient pottery shard. Tikal and Kapan were frenemies at best, each maneuvering for economic and military dominance. The rulers, such as Tikal's king, Siaj-Chan K-Awil II, weren't above a little political intrigue, often seeking to expand their influence through strategic marriages, or, when diplomacy failed, a good old-fashioned war. Economics played a crucial role in this epic saga. The Maya didn't have currency like we do today, so they relied on a barter system. Jade, cacao, beans, and obsidian were the gold, euros, and dollars of their time. Trade routes snaked through the jungles, connecting city-states and bringing in goods from as far away as present-day Mexico and Costa Rica. Tikal, with its strategic location, became a bustling trade hub, its markets teeming with exotic wares that would make any ancient shopaholic swoon. But remember, with great wealth comes great responsibility and a fair amount of stress. Keeping a city-state afloat wasn't just about building bigger pyramids or hosting lavish festivals. It required an intricate understanding of resource management. The Maya were masters of this, developing sophisticated agricultural techniques that allowed them to feed their burgeoning populations. Terracing, raised fields, and complex irrigation systems turned the jungle into a veritable breadbasket. Yet, even their ingenious methods couldn't always keep up with the demands of a growing society, leading to shortages, famines, and the occasional uprising. As we delve deeper into this era, it's essential to separate the myth from the reality. The romantic image of the Maya as peaceful astronomers and architects is only part of the story. The truth is, the Maya were as complex and dynamic as any modern civilization. They were warriors, politicians, and traders, navigating a world that demanded both brute strength and delicate diplomacy. It's also crucial to acknowledge the role of religion and ritual in Maya society. These weren't just ceremonial niceties. They were integral to the political and social fabric. The rulers of Tikal and Kapan claimed divine right, their authority bolstered by elaborate ceremonies that involved bloodletting and offerings to the gods. It was a display of power and piety, a reminder to the populace that their leaders were not just mere mortals, but chosen by the divine. Amidst all this, the Maya calendar loomed large, guiding everything from agricultural cycles to warfare. The infamous long count calendar, which some mistakenly thought predicted the end of the world in 2012, was actually a complex system of timekeeping that allowed the Maya to plan their affairs with astronomical precision. It was the Swiss watch of calendars, a testament to their mathematical prowess and a reflection of their obsession with the cosmos. As the centuries rolled on, the competition between city-states intensified. New players emerged, alliances shifted, and the stakes grew ever higher. The Maya civilization was on a trajectory that would see it reach unparalleled heights, yet the seeds of its eventual decline were already being sown. The interplay of power, economics, and environment created a precarious balance that, while awe-inspiring, was also inherently unstable. So, as we leave the bustling streets of Tikal and Kapan for now, it's clear that the story of the Maya is far from over. These cities are more than just ruins in a jungle. They are echoes of a civilization that was as vibrant and ambitious as any before or since. In the next chapters, we'll explore the continued rise of the Maya, their triumphs and tribulations, and the legacy they left behind. A legacy that still captures our imaginations today. Stay tuned, because this tale is only getting started. As we dive deeper into the jungle of Maya society, let's pull back the curtain on the social hierarchy that made their world tick. Now, if you thought high school cliques were cutthroat, wait till you hear about the Maya class system. Picture this. At the top of the social pyramid sat the Ajor, or king, with a divine mandate that was more exclusive than a VIP section at a celebrity party. These rulers were seen as living gods, a handy title that made everything from tax collection to war declarations a divine duty. Below the Ajor were the noble class, the priests and scribes, who, much like the ancient equivalent of influencers, shaped public opinion and dictated cultural trends. But let's not forget the true backbone of Maya society, the commoners. These folks were the engine that kept the whole civilization purring along. Your average Maya farmer spent his days knee-deep in maize fields, working under a sun that could rival a summer in Phoenix. And while they weren't exactly cashing in big paychecks or lounging in palatial estates, their labor was the lifeline of the economy. Without them, those lavish elite parties, complete with jade jewelry and chocolate drinks, wouldn't have been possible. It's the classic tale of the unsung heroes of history, working tirelessly while the upper crust enjoyed the fruits of their labor. And speaking of labor, let's talk about gender roles, because if you thought the modern wage gap was bad, the Maya had their own version of occupational sexism. Men were the primary farmers, warriors, and builders, while women were expected to manage the household, weave textiles, and occasionally even partake in the market trade. It was a division of labor that would make any modern HR department cringe. But let's not paint all Maya women as mere background figures. Noble women could wield considerable power, sometimes ruling city-states in their own right, a testament to their capability in a world that often overlooked them. Now, let's take a detour into the world of Maya math and astronomy. If the Maya had a Tinder profile, it would read, "Geeky about numbers, passionate about stars." These people were the original mathletes, crafting a number system that included the concept of zero long before it was cool in the rest of the world. Maya mathematicians could calculate with a precision that would make today's standardized tests blush. Their vigesimal, base 20, system might sound like a quirky math teacher's idea, but it was a stroke of genius that allowed them to perform complex calculations with ease. And then there's their astronomical expertise, which was nothing short of star-studded. The Maya were so in tune with the cosmos that their calendar was more accurate than the one on your smartphone. Their long count calendar, which infamously sparked end-of-world theories in 2012, was actually a sophisticated system that spanned over 5,000 years. It tracked time with a precision that would put any modern calendar app to shame. But let's clear up that 2012 myth once and for all. The Maya never predicted an apocalypse. They were just resetting the cosmic clock, like hitting the refresh button on your browser. In the Maya world, time wasn't just a way to schedule your day. It was a sacred cycle. Their calendars guided everything from planting seasons to religious ceremonies, and their priests were the ultimate timekeepers, the ancient equivalent of a Swiss watchmaker. The Maya believed that each day was imbued with its own energy, influencing events and human affairs. This cosmic connection gave their rulers an air of mystique, as they claim to harness these energies through rituals and offerings. It's a blend of science and spirituality that would make even the most skeptical modern mind pause. But let's zoom out for a moment and consider the broader economic landscape of Maya society. The absence of a standardized currency didn't stop them from building a thriving trade network. Instead, they bartered with commodities like cacao beans, which were as valuable as gold. Imagine using chocolate as currency. Suddenly, those late-night chocolate cravings seem like fiscal responsibility. Jade, obsidian, and feathers were also hot commodities, facilitating trade across vast distances. In this world, wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in the richness of one's trade goods and the connections they could forge. As we navigate the Maya social and economic terrain, it's clear that their society was as intricate as their woven textiles. The rigid class system had its drawbacks, but it also provided structure and stability in a world where survival was no small feat. The commoners, though often overlooked, were the true lifeblood of the civilization, while the elite played their part in governance, culture, and cosmic connection. And let's not forget the role of the calendar and mathematics, which kept everything running with the precision of a well-oiled machine. As we continue our journey, we'll delve into the political machinations and cultural nuances that define the Maya world. This is a civilization that thrived in the face of adversity, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The story of the Maya is far from over. In fact, we're just getting started. So stay tuned as we uncover more layers of this fascinating tapestry, exploring the triumphs and trials that shaped one of history's most remarkable civilizations. As we peel back the intricate layers of Maya civilization, it's time to face the elephant in the room, or in this case, the jaguar in the jungle. How did a society so advanced in mathematics, astronomy, and agriculture face a decline that has fueled more conspiracy theories than a late-night sci-fi marathon? Spoiler alert, it wasn't aliens, and it wasn't some mystical vanishing act. Instead, the Maya civilization's decline was a slow burn, a series of unfortunate events that would give Lemony Snicket a run for his money. First up, let's tackle the biggies: overpopulation and resource depletion. Imagine throwing the ultimate house party that's so good everyone wants to stay, but eventually you run out of chips and the plumbing backs up. That's a snapshot of the Mayas' predicament. By the 9th century, their population had ballooned to an estimated 10 million people across the lowlands. That's like cramming the entire population of modern-day Portugal into an area with none of the conveniences of Lisbon. The land that once generously yielded crops now struggled to feed its hungry inhabitants. As the population grew, so did the demands on the environment. The Mayas' sophisticated agriculture, terraces, irrigation, and all could only go so far. Deforestation became rampant as people cleared more land for farming and construction. This wasn't just a matter of losing some shade trees. It led to soil erosion and reduced agricultural productivity. Combine this with a few devastating droughts, and you've got a recipe for disaster. The Maya were caught in a vicious cycle. More mouths to feed demanded more land required more deforestation, and more deforestation led to more soil erosion. It's the kind of downward spiral that would make a Greek tragedy look like a sitcom. Now, let's talk climate change. Not the kind you blame on SUVs and industrial smokestacks, but the natural climate shifts that the Maya couldn't control. Around the 9th century, a series of prolonged droughts hit the region. These weren't your garden variety dry spells. They were epic, biblical droughts that could have inspired a desert-themed Mad Max sequel. The Maya had built their cities around water sources, but when those dried up, it was game over for many urban centers. The once thriving metropolises of Tikal and Kapan faced dwindling water supplies, leading to crop failures and ultimately mass exoduses. But environmental factors were only part of the story. The societal structure of the Maya played a role in their unraveling. As resources became scarce, competition between city-states intensified. Remember the ancient Game of Thrones vibe? Well, imagine a season where everyone's vying for the Iron Throne, but the throne turns out to be made of melting ice. When resources are scarce, alliances crumble, and power struggles become a blood sport. The Maya rulers, once seen as divine intermediaries, faced growing unrest as they failed to deliver prosperity. It was like losing an election, but with considerably more feathered headdresses and fewer campaign speeches. And here's where the myth-busting comes in. The Maya didn't just vanish into thin air. The civilization didn't disappear, it transformed. As the classic period cities declined, many Maya moved to the northern Yucatan Peninsula, where cities like Chichen Itzá rose to prominence. This shift marked a transition rather than an apocalypse. It was like moving from New York to Miami, still plenty happening, just with more sunshine and a different vibe. So why does the myth of the Maya's mysterious disappearance persist? Well, it's a story that's too tantalizing to resist. A sophisticated civilization swallowed by the jungle, leaving behind grandiose ruins and tales of lost knowledge. It's the kind of narrative that fuels imaginations and sells tickets to blockbuster movies. But reality, as usual, is more complex and much less tidy. The Maya didn't vanish. They adapted, evolving into the modern descendants who still inhabit parts of Mexico and Central America today. Drawing parallels to our modern world isn't hard. Overpopulation, resource depletion, and climate change are challenges we still face, albeit with different tools at our disposal. The Maya story is a cautionary tale of environmental management and societal resilience, or the lack thereof. It's a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can falter when faced with ecological and social pressures. In the end, the Maya civilization's decline wasn't a single cataclysmic event, but a gradual transformation shaped by environmental, economic, and social factors. It's a saga of survival, adaptation, and rebirth, one that continues to unfold in the vibrant cultures and traditions of the Maya people today. As we prepare to dive deeper into the remaining chapters of their story, let's keep in mind that history isn't just about what was. It's about what is and what could be. Hang tight, because the Maya still have plenty to teach us, and this tale is far from over. As we turn the final page in the saga of the Maya, let's dig into their legacy, a treasure chest of cultural and scientific contributions that continue to dazzle scholars and tantalize conspiracy theorists alike. Spoiler alert, the Maya didn't just leave behind a few crumbling pyramids and a cryptic calendar. No, their impact is as vast as the cosmos they so meticulously charted. First, let's talk science. The Maya were the original STEM enthusiasts, with achievements that would make software engineers and astronomers do a double take. Their astronomical observatories, like the one at Chichen Itzá, were ancient planetariums, minus the popcorn and reclining seats. The Maya tracked celestial events with such precision that their predictions often rivaled those of today's astronomers, who have the luxury of telescopes and computers. And let's not forget their invention of zero, a concept so revolutionary that it took the rest of the world centuries to catch up. While Europe was still figuring out Roman numerals, the Maya were busy calculating the trajectory of Venus with a base 20-number system. It's like comparing a flip phone to a smartphone. One is clunky and outdated, the other sleek and ahead of its time. But science wasn't their only forte. The Maya also left an indelible mark on art and architecture. Their vivid murals, intricate pottery, and towering pyramids are testaments to an aesthetic sensibility that blended beauty with functionality. Their cities, such as Tikal and Palenque, were masterpieces of urban planning, complete with palaces, plazas, and causeways that connected the urban sprawl like ancient superhighways. The craftsmanship in their stone carvings and stucco facades could rival any Renaissance artist's work. This wasn't just about creating something pretty to look at. It was about telling stories, recording history, and asserting power, all without a single tweet or Instagram post. Now, let's fast forward to the present and take a look at how the Maya legacy still pulses through modern Central America. Today, over 6 million Maya descendants live in the region, preserving their rich heritage through language, customs, and traditional practices. The Maya languages, with their melodic tones and intricate grammar, are still spoken by communities across Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. It's like the ultimate linguistic time capsule, a living link to the past that defies the erosion of time. Culturally, the Maya have left an enduring imprint on everything from textiles to cuisine. If you've ever savored a tamale or admired a brightly woven huipil, you've experienced a slice of Maya tradition. Their agricultural techniques, too, have stood the test of time. The milpa system of crop rotation, which pairs maize with beans and squash, is still practiced today, proving that some ideas are just too good to fade away. It's like discovering that Grandma's recipe is also a Michelin star-worthy dish. Yet, despite these tangible contributions, the myths surrounding the Maya loom large. The romanticized image of the Maya as mystical stargazers and keepers of esoteric knowledge persists, overshadowing the reality of a society that was as gritty as it was grand. This allure has made the Maya a darling of pop culture, with their pyramids and calendars starring in everything from sci-fi blockbusters to ancient alien conspiracy theories. You know you've made it into the cultural zeitgeist when people think you had extraterrestrial help building your monuments. This brings us to the elephant, or should I say UFO, in the room. The notion that the Maya were in cahoots with aliens. It's a theory that's about as plausible as believing Stonehenge was a prehistoric Wi-Fi router. Yet it persists because, let's face it, the idea of ancient astronauts is irresistible. It's the stuff of late-night documentaries and YouTube rabbit holes, providing the perfect blend of mystery and imagination that keeps us glued to our screens. The truth, though less sensational, is far more impressive. The Maya achieved their feats through sheer human ingenuity, hard work, and a little help from Mother Nature. In the end, the legacy of the Maya is a tapestry woven with threads of scientific insight, artistic brilliance, and cultural resilience. They were a civilization that dreamed big, reached for the stars, and left a footprint that continues to inspire and intrigue. As we wrap up this journey through their history, let's remember that while the myths are captivating, the reality is just as compelling. The Maya didn't need alien intervention to achieve greatness. They proved that human potential is as boundless as the universe they so carefully observed. And that, my friends, is the real magic of the Maya. In an era when most folks were still trying to figure out fire, Chandragupta decided he was ready to light up a whole empire. We're talking about the Gupta Empire, which kicked off around 320 CE and is often labeled the Golden Age of India. Now, before you roll your eyes at yet another Golden Age cliché, let's dig into why this era might actually deserve that shiny title. Spoiler alert. It wasn't all gold and glory. Picture Chandragupta at the helm, the founding father who, like all good ancient rulers, had a flair for the dramatic. He wasn't just content with ruling a small patch of land. Nope, he wanted a kingdom that stretched as far as his eyes, and perhaps his ego could see. Armed with political savvy rather than mere brute force, Chandragupta began weaving alliances like a master social networker of the pre-internet age. Marriages here, alliances there. He knew that sometimes a strategic wedding did more than 100 battles. The Gupta Empire, at its peak, spread across a considerable chunk of the Indian subcontinent. It was like the ancient version of Monopoly, but with less colorful paper money and more real estate. We're talking about a territory that stretched from the Indus River in the west to the Bengal region in the east, encompassing the modern-day northern and central parts of India. If you're counting in today's geography, that's roughly the size of Turkey, or for another perspective, about 3 times the size of modern-day France. Now, that's a lot of land to cover on foot or elephant, but who was counting? Chandragupta's Game of Thrones wasn't just about gobbling up land like a kid at a candy store. It was about creating stability and a semblance of unity in a region that had been a patchwork of small, often warring states. He knew that a fractured kingdom was about as effective as a chocolate teapot. So he built his empire on strong foundations, making sure it was more than just a flash in the pan. The geography of the Gupta Empire wasn't just about bragging rights. though I'm sure Chandragupta wouldn't have minded a bit of that. It played a crucial role in the empire's prosperity. The fertile plains of the Ganges River made it a breadbasket, allowing the empire to support a population that historians estimate could have been in the tens of millions. And let's not forget trade. Those trade routes stretching across Asia were the ancient world's equivalent of having a broadband connection. Commodities, ideas, and culture flowed through the empire like a river, watering the seeds of its golden age. But let's not get too carried away with romantic notions. The expansion of the Gupta Empire wasn't just about enlightened leadership and peaceful negotiations. There were battles, skirmishes, and the usual ancient world cocktail of blood, sweat, and tears. The Guptas, like any good empire builders, knew that sometimes you had to crack a few skulls to make an omelette, or in their case, to secure a kingdom. So, while Chandragupta I was laying the groundwork for what would become one of history's most culturally vibrant eras, he was also ensuring that his empire was as secure as a fortress. It's a reminder that behind every golden age, there's a less glamorous, more gritty story of power plays and political chess games. Yet, as we delve deeper into the Gupta Empire, we'll see how this mix of strategy and creative vision laid the foundation for a period that still dazzles historians, and makes the rest of us wonder if we've been doing this whole civilization thing wrong. Yet, as we delve deeper into the Gupta Empire, we'll see how this mix of strategy and creative vision laid the foundation for a period that still dazzles historians, and makes the rest of us wonder if we've been doing this whole civilization thing wrong. Now fasten your seatbelts and adjust your mental maps, because we're about to embark on a whirlwind tour through the thriving economy of the Gupta Empire, where trade routes were the ancient world's highways and currency was the passport to prosperity. The Gupta Empire didn't just stumble upon its economic success. It was the result of some serious logistical planning and savvy trading instincts. Imagine the empire as the ancient world's answer to Amazon Prime. Only instead of clicking add to cart, traders were bartering and bargaining their way through a network of trade routes that stretched across Asia. These routes were the arteries of commerce that pumped the lifeblood of wealth from one end of the empire to the other. Silk, spices, precious gems, and cotton were the hot commodities of the day, making their way from the Indian subcontinent to as far as the Roman Empire and China. Speaking of silk, the Gupta Empire was like the Silk Road's cool cousin who always showed up with the best party favors. While China was the undisputed king of silk, the Guptas knew how to flaunt their cotton and spices like nobody's business. Cotton, which had been cultivated in India for centuries, was transformed into textiles that were shipped off to foreign lands, bringing back wealth and prestige. And let's not forget about spices. The Gupta's black pepper was worth more than its weight in gold, literally. Roman documents from the time reveal that Roman traders were willing to pay a hefty price for these exotic flavors, making the spice trade a cornerstone of the Gupta economy. But what about the nuts and bolts of this economic machine? How did transactions take place in an empire that was as sprawling as it was diverse? Enter the Gupta coins, the bling of their day. These coins weren't just currency. They were a statement, a declaration of the empire's wealth and sophistication. Gold coins, known as dinars, were minted with the faces of Gupta kings, each one a miniature billboard advertising the empire's stability and prosperity. And just like a well-crafted Instagram post, these coins told a story of culture, power, and economic might. But let's not romanticize too much. This wasn't some utopian economy where everyone prospered equally. The coins, while beautiful and significant, were also a reminder of the stark economic divisions within the empire. Wealth was concentrated at the top, with the royals and elites enjoying the lion's share of prosperity. Meanwhile, the farmers and labourers who toiled in the fields and workshops often saw little of the riches their work generated. In today's terms, the Gupta Empire had its own version of income inequality, where the trickle-down effect was more of a gentle drizzle. Yet, despite these inequalities, the Gupta economy was a marvel of its time. It was a system that relied on a mix of state control and private enterprise, with local markets and trade guilds playing a crucial role. These guilds were like the medieval chamber of commerce, regulating trade, setting prices, and even providing loans to their members. And all of this without a single spreadsheet or smartphone app in sight. It's a testament to human ingenuity that such complex economic systems could flourish in an era devoid of modern technology. Of course, trade wasn't just about goods and money. It was also a vehicle for cultural exchange. The bustling markets of the Gupta Empire were melting pots where ideas and innovations were swapped alongside spices and silks. This cross-pollination of culture helped to fuel the artistic and intellectual achievements that the era is famous for. It's a reminder that behind the glittering facade of economic success, there was a vibrant cultural tapestry being woven. The Gupta's trading prowess extended beyond land routes. Maritime trade was also a significant contributor to the empire's wealth. The ports along India's western coast were bustling hubs where ships laden with cargo set sail for distant shores. These maritime routes connected the Gupta Empire with the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, serving as conduits for both commerce and cultural exchange. As we peel back the layers of the Gupta economy, it becomes clear that this wasn't just a period of material wealth, but also one of profound intellectual and cultural growth. The empire's prosperity funded advancements in science, art, and literature, creating a legacy that would echo through the ages. Yet, as we admire the grandeur of this golden age, it's important to remember the complexities and contradictions that lay beneath the surface. So there you have it, the Gupta Empire, a civilization that managed to create a sophisticated economy without the trappings of the digital age. They may not have had Bitcoin, but they had a currency system that was just as effective, and perhaps a little more tangible. As we continue our journey through this fascinating period, we'll see how the Gupta's economic achievements set the stage for their cultural and intellectual triumphs. In the next episode, we'll dive into the arts and sciences of the Gupta Empire, exploring how their innovations continue to influence us today. Stay tuned, because this ancient world saga is far from over. And as we wade deeper into the cultural riches of the Gupta Empire, let's swap out our economic hats for artistic berets, because it's time to explore the visual splendor that made this period the envy of ancient influencers. Picture this, the temples and monuments of the Gupta era standing tall and proud, a little like the ancient world's version of a viral Instagram post. No filters needed, thank you very much. Let's kick things off with the Ajanta Caves, those magnificent rock-cut wonders dating back to around the 2nd century BCE, but truly flourishing during our Gupta spotlight. These caves are the Sistine chapels of ancient India, minus the long lines of tourists snapping selfies. Carved into the face of a sheer rock cliff, the Ajanta Caves are a blend of art and architecture that would make even the most seasoned modern-day architect swoon. There are 30 of these caves, each adorned with sculptures and paintings that are as intricate as they are awe-inspiring. The vibrant frescoes tell stories of the life of Buddha, capturing everything from his serene meditations to those less than peaceful encounters with temptation. Now, why is this a big deal, you ask? Well, these caves weren't just a place to get your zen on. They were a testament to the Gupta's mastery of visual storytelling. The artists of the time didn't just slap some paint on the walls and call it a day. Oh no, they painstakingly created scenes that reflected the societal values and spiritual beliefs of their era. The precision in these murals is astonishing, especially when you consider they were working with basic tools and natural dyes. No digital touch-ups here. It's as if the artists had an uncanny ability to capture the essence of humanity with just a few brushstrokes, a skill that modern creators often chase with varying degrees of success. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The notion of Gupta art as perfect is a bit of a romantic myth. Sure, the Ajanta Caves are masterpieces, but they weren't the result of a blissfully smooth creative process. We're talking about ancient artists who had their fair share of off days. Some frescoes show signs of wear and tear, and a few have faded altogether over the centuries. These imperfections remind us that the pursuit of artistic perfection is as elusive as finding a Wi-Fi signal in the middle of nowhere. Moving on from the caves, let's talk temples. The Gupta period saw an architectural evolution that laid the groundwork for the quintessential Hindu temple structure we recognize today. These temples weren't just places of worship. They were community hubs where folks gathered for festivals, debates, and the occasional scandalous gossip session. The temples, intricate carvings and towering spires, were designed to inspire awe and devotion, serving as physical manifestations of the divine. Take the Dashavatara temple in Dioga, for instance. Built around the 6th century, this structure is like the architectural equivalent of a greatest hits album. It features a square sanctum, a flat roof, and elaborate carvings depicting the 10 avatars of Vishnu. The temple is a testament to the Gupta's ability to blend artistry with spirituality, creating spaces that were as functional as they were beautiful. Plus, it's a reminder that even in ancient times, folks appreciated a well-designed building. After all, who wouldn't want to worship in style? The real kicker about Gupta architecture is how it spread its influence far and wide, like an ancient version of a viral TikTok trend. The architectural styles developed during this period became templates for future generations, influencing temple designs across Asia for centuries to come. Talk about leaving a legacy. But let's not get carried away with the grandeur. The laborers who toiled to bring these structures to life often did so under harsh conditions. While the upper echelons of society marveled at the beauty of these sacred spaces, the workers were the unsung heroes, chiseling away at stone in the relentless heat. It's a reminder that behind every stunning facade lies a story of sweat and resilience, a narrative that's as relevant today as it was back then. Now, it wouldn't be a true exploration of Gupta art without addressing the sculptures. The Guptas had a knack for creating statues that were both majestic and lifelike. These weren't just stone figures. They were embodiments of divine grace, crafted with a finesse that captured the subtleties of human expression. The iconic sandstone sculptures, like the ones at Sarnath, depict Buddha in serene meditation, exuding a sense of peace that seems almost tangible. It's as if the sculptors managed to freeze a moment in time, distilling tranquility into their work. But here's where we bust another myth, the idea that all Gupta sculptures were flawless. Sure, many were exquisite, but not every chisel stroke was a masterpiece. Some sculptures were left unfinished or bore the marks of hasty craftsmanship. It's a reminder that even in the golden age of art, not every creation was destined for a museum pedestal. These sculptures also reflected the social dynamics of the time. The emphasis on depicting deities and spiritual figures speaks volumes about the society's values and priorities. Art wasn't just for decoration. It was a vehicle for conveying religious and philosophical ideas. It shaped the cultural consciousness, influencing how people perceived the world and their place in it. As we admire the legacy of Gupta art and architecture, it's easy to get swept up in the romance of it all. But let's keep our feet firmly planted in reality. The Guptas, like us, navigated a world of contradictions where beauty and hardship coexisted. Their art was both a reflection of their aspirations and a testament to their imperfections. It's a narrative that resonates across the ages, reminding us that the pursuit of beauty is as flawed and fascinating as the humans who create it. As we wrap up this leg of our journey through the Gupta Empire, it's clear that their artistic achievements were more than just decorative flourishes. They were expressions of a vibrant culture, a civilization that dared to dream and create in ways that continue to inspire. But don't hang up your historian hat just yet. We've got more cultural wonders to explore. Next, we'll delve into the intellectual and scientific breakthroughs of the Gupta era, because this ancient world tour is just getting started. Stay tuned, because the Gupta Empire's story is far from over, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Shifting from art and architecture, let's dive headfirst into the intellectual goldmine of the Gupta Empire. Buckle up, because we're about to meet some of history's original geeks, the thinkers who made calculus cool before it was even a thing. Forget your modern textbooks. The Guptas were the real deal. laying down the foundations for a scientific revolution with nothing more than ink, parchment, and some serious brain power. First up, Aryabhata, the kind of guy who looked at the sky and saw a cosmic puzzle begging to be solved. Born in 476 CE, Aryabhata was the math and astronomy whiz kid of his time. While most were busy counting sheep, Aryabhata was busy counting stars, and doing it with uncanny precision. He pennied the Aryabhatiya at just 23, a treatise that was like the ancient world's answer to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, minus the humor, but with a heap of groundbreaking math. Aryabhata didn't just dabble in numbers, he revolutionized them. Ever hear of the number 0? Of course, you have. It's the little hero that makes our number system work. But back then, it was Aryabhata's groundbreaking use of 0 that pushed the boundaries. He didn't quite invent it. Credit goes to earlier Indian mathematicians, but he certainly gave it a starring role. Thanks to Aryabhata, 0 wasn't just a concept. It was a game-changer that launched 1,000 math exams and an equal amount of student groans. And Aryabhata's talents didn't stop at the terrestrial. He turned his gaze skyward, calculating the Earth's circumference with a precision that could give GPS a run for its money. 835 miles, just a hair off modern measurements. And he wasn't just content with earthbound calculations. He delved into the realms of astronomy, proposing that the Earth rotated on its axis, sending shockwaves through the scientific community. Remember, this was well over a millennium before Copernicus came along to steal the spotlight. But Aryabhata wasn't the only brainiac on the block. Step aside for Varahamihira, another stellar mind of the Gupta era. Born in 505 CE, Varahamihira was the kind of polymath who makes the rest of us look like we're slacking. He had a finger in every scholarly pie: astronomy, astrology, architecture, and even fashion. Yes, fashion. Varahamihira wrote the Brihat Samhita, an encyclopedia of sorts that covered everything from planetary motions to predicting rainfall based on cloud formations. Talk about a multitasker. Varahamihira's work included insights into botanical sciences and gemology, because why not? He was all about using empirical evidence to make sense of the world, a methodology that laid the groundwork for future scientific exploration. His work was a reminder that the Guptas weren't just about looking pretty. They were about understanding the natural world in a way that was remarkably ahead of their time. Now, let's talk about the educational system that churned out these intellectual heavyweights. In the Gupta Empire, getting an education was a bit like signing up for a marathon. There were no online courses or Khan Academy videos. It was all about the Gurukula system, where students lived with their gurus, learning through rote memorization and debates, kind of like a never-ending debate club, but with more scrolls and fewer snacks. These educational hubs were the ancient equivalent of Ivy League schools, with universities like Nalanda drawing students from as far afield as China and Korea. Nalanda was the Harvard of its time, offering courses in subjects ranging from mathematics and medicine to Buddhist studies and philosophy. Imagine a place where the world's brightest minds gathered to share ideas, without a single PowerPoint presentation in sight. It's a testament to the intellectual vigor of the era, even if it meant living in rudimentary conditions and surviving on a diet of rice and lentils. But let's not gloss over the less glamorous aspects. The education system wasn't exactly egalitarian. Access was largely limited to the upper castes, leaving many out in the intellectual cold. And while the scholars were busy pondering the cosmos, the rest of the population was too busy ploughing fields to care about the latest theorem. It's a reminder that even the brightest periods in history had their shadows, where enlightenment was a luxury not afforded to all. And how did these scholars manage without Google? Simple, they relied on an oral tradition that was as robust as it was ancient. Knowledge was passed down through generations like a game of telephone, but with far more accuracy. The human brain was the original search engine, storing vast amounts of information without the benefit of bookmarks or cloud storage. It's a testament to human ingenuity that such a system could thrive, even if it sounds like a recipe for a headache. As we marvel at the intellectual feats of the Gupta Empire, it's easy to romanticize the era as a utopia of scholarly pursuit. But beneath the surface, it was a time of intense competition and pressure, where the pursuit of knowledge was both a privilege and a burden. The legacy of the Gupta scholars is a reminder that innovation often comes with a price, where the pursuit of truth is both exhilarating and exhausting. So there you have it, the Gupta Empire, a civilization that managed to turn the pursuit of knowledge into an art form. They may not have had the internet, but they had the kind of intellectual curiosity that could put any modern tech giant to shame. As we continue our journey through this fascinating period, we'll see how the Guptas' contributions to science and mathematics continue to echo through the ages. But don't hang up your notebook just yet. There's more to uncover in this ancient world saga. Stay tuned, because the story of the Gupta Empire is far from over, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. And as we unravel the threads of the Gupta Empire's achievements, it's time to face the bittersweet truth. Every golden age has its twilight. The Gupta Empire, despite its brilliance in art, science, and culture, was no exception. Picture a cultural juggernaut that dazzled the ancient world like a comet blazing across the night sky. But like all comets, it eventually burned out. Now, let's look at what dimmed the sparkle of this historical powerhouse. As much as we'd like to believe that the Gupta Empire could have gone on forever, history had other plans. Internal strife and power struggles began to gnaw at the empire's foundations like termites in a wooden palace. The Guptas, much like the rest of us, weren't immune to a little family drama. After the reign of Skandagupta, one of the last great Gupta emperors, the empire began to fragment. Imagine trying to keep your family together on a road trip gone wrong. But instead of bickering over the radio station, the stakes were entire provinces. The Gupta rulers following Skandagupta were about as effective as a chocolate fireguard. They couldn't hold the empire together, leading to a rapid succession of weak rulers who were more interested in squabbling over power than in the welfare of their subjects. It was like Game of Thrones, but with fewer dragons and more bureaucratic squabbles. This internal discord made the empire ripe for invasion. Enter the Hunas, or the Hephthalites, if you want to get all formal about it. These Central Asian nomads were the ancient world's equivalent of a thunderstorm rolling in on a sunny day. By the middle of the 5th century, they were knocking on the Gupta Empire's door, and it wasn't to borrow a cup of sugar. The Hunas were a force to be reckoned with, and their invasions were like a wrecking ball to the already shaky Gupta structure. Their attacks led to the sacking of key cities and the plundering of wealth, leaving the empire's coffers emptier than an ancient swear jar. The economic impact of these invasions was catastrophic. Trade routes that had once hummed with activity went silent, like a party that ended too soon. With trade disrupted, the flow of wealth into the empire dried up faster than a puddle in the desert. The economic backbone that had supported the Guptas' cultural and scientific achievements began to crumble, and with it, the empire's ability to sustain its power. But let's not just blame outsiders. The Guptas had their fair share of internal issues. Corruption ran rampant, and administrative inefficiencies were the norm rather than the exception. Local governors, or maharajas, began to assert their independence, carving out their own little fiefdoms at the expense of central authority. It was as if the empire had become a patchwork quilt of competing interests, each pulling at the seams until it all fell apart. So, what's left when an empire falls apart faster than a cheap umbrella in a storm? A legacy. Despite its decline, the Gupta Empire left a cultural footprint that echoes through the corridors of history. They were the original influencers, setting trends in art, science, and trade that would shape the world far beyond the Indian subcontinent. Their advancements in mathematics and astronomy laid the groundwork for future generations, lighting the path for scholars from the Islamic Golden Age to the European Renaissance. In art and architecture, the Gupta era was like the original Renaissance before the Renaissance. Their temples and sculptures influenced styles that spread across Southeast Asia, leaving a lasting imprint on regions like Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. The intricate carvings and architectural designs became templates for future generations, proving that the Gupta's cultural DNA was as robust as it was widespread. And let's not forget the Gupta's contributions to literature. The Sanskrit language flourished under their patronage, producing works that would become cornerstones of Indian literature. Kalidasa, often hailed as India's Shakespeare, pennied his famous plays and poems during this period, works that continue to resonate with audiences today. The Gupta's literary achievements were like a literary beacon, illuminating the path for future writers and poets. So, what are we to make of the Gupta Empire's rise and fall? It's a tale as old as time itself, a reminder that empires, like all things, have a best-before date. They rise, they shine, and inevitably they fade. But in their fading, they leave behind legacies that continue to influence and inspire. The Gupta Empire may have crumbled, but its cultural and intellectual contributions remain etched in the annals of history. As we wrap up our journey through the Gupta Empire, let's take a moment to appreciate the cyclical nature of history. Civilizations rise and fall like waves crashing against the shore, each leaving a unique imprint on the sands of time. The Guptas remind us that even in decline, there is beauty and wisdom to be found. They were a civilization that dared to dream big, leaving behind a legacy that continues to remind us of the heights humanity can achieve, even when the odds are stacked against us. And so, as we bid farewell to the Gupta Empire, let's remember it not just as a chapter in a history book, but as a vibrant tapestry of human achievement. It's a story of triumphs and trials, of dazzling heights and inevitable declines. A reminder that while empires may crumble, the echoes of their greatness can still be heard, long after the last stone has fallen. So here's to the Guptas, a civilization that shone brightly and left us with a legacy that will continue to inspire for generations to come. Ramses II, the man with a reputation as grand as the pyramids themselves, strutted onto the stage of history in 1279 BCE like he owned the place. Because, quite frankly, he kind of did. Born into an era of architectural marvels, political intrigue, and familial drama worthy of a Netflix series, Ramses was your quintessential, born with a silver spoon type, except in his case, it was likely gold. His father, Seti I, was the Pharaoh before him, a man who set the bar high by restoring order in a way that would make even the most seasoned organizer nod in approval. Ramses wasn't just any heir waiting in the wings, though. This guy had a mission. He wasn't content to just sit back and let history happen. He was determined to grab it by the collar and give it a good shake. The political landscape of ancient Egypt was as complex as a soap opera plot, with the Hittites, Nubians, and Libyans all wanting a piece of the pie. But Ramses, with his eye for strategy and flair for drama, saw this as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Early on, he displayed a knack for self-promotion that would make modern influencers weep with envy. Take his family life, for instance. Ramses had more than 100 children. Yes, you heard that right, more than a century's worth of offspring. Part dynasty, part PR campaign, these kids were like walking, talking billboards for his legacy. Not only did they ensure political alliances far and wide, but they were also living proof of his vitality. "Look at me," his actions seemed to say. "I'm as fruitful as the Nile in flood season." But let's not get too misty-eyed about his domestic achievements. Ramses was also a master of political theatre, a man who could turn a simple reform into an epic tale of triumph. Early in his reign, he embarked on ambitious building projects, crafting temples and statues that screamed, "I was here," louder than any graffiti artist could manage. These weren't just architectural endeavors. They were declarations of power, eye-catching symbols of a reign that was meant to be remembered. And remember him they did. Ramses was the kind of guy who'd put his name on everything, from colossal statues to the smallest of bricks. If you were in ancient Egypt and you didn't know who Ramses was, you were either living under a rock or that rock had his name carved into it. His reforms weren't just about vanity, though. They were strategic moves to consolidate power, strengthen the economy, and keep the peace in a land that was always a heartbeat away from chaos. His family background provided him with the connections and clout necessary to pull off such grandiose plans. As the son of Seti I and grandson of Ramesses I, Ramses was steeped in a legacy of leadership and ambition. This lineage was a double-edged sword, though. It came with expectations as heavy as the stone blocks used to build the pyramids. Ramses was expected not just to maintain the status quo, but to elevate it, to transform his kingdom into an empire that would echo through the ages. And echo it did. His early reforms, which included reorganizing the army and bolstering Egypt's defenses, were as much about practical governance as they were about crafting a narrative. Ramses understood the power of a good story, the kind that can inspire loyalty and deter enemies. He was the original spin doctor, weaving tales of his prowess that would be immortalized in stone for millennia. But beneath the grandeur and the glory, the realpolitik of Ramses' reign was a constant balancing act. The resources it took to sustain his monumental ambitions were immense, a fact not lost on his scribes, who dutifully recorded the costs in painstaking detail. Yet Ramses knew that maintaining a facade of limitless power was worth every ounce of gold spent. After all, in the ancient world, perception was often as powerful as reality. Through all this, Ramses never lost sight of his ultimate goal: to ensure that his name would be spoken with reverence long after his body was dust. And in that, he succeeded. Today, Ramses II is remembered not just as a pharaoh, but as a legend, a larger-than-life figure who understood the art of legacy building better than anyone. His story is a testament to the power of ambition, the allure of self-promotion, and the enduring impact of a well-crafted narrative. Ramses II, the original hype man, was just warming up as he prepared to tackle one of the most dramatic episodes of his reign, the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE. Now, if you're imagining a scene straight out of a Hollywood epic, complete with chariot charges and a soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, you're not entirely off. But the reality, as always, was a bit more complicated. So here's the setup. Ramses was squaring off against the Hittites, who were like the cool kids of the ancient Near East, hanging out in what is now Turkey. They were no strangers to a good dust-up, and they had their eyes on the strategically juicy city of Kadesh, nestled near the Orontes River in today's Syria. Ramses, not one to back down from a challenge or a chance to strut his stuff, decided this was the perfect opportunity to show off his military prowess. Picture Ramses leading about 20,000 men, including 2,000 chariots, into battle. That's not just a parade, it's a full-blown tour de force. On the other side, Muwatalli II, the Hittite king, was no slouch either. He had his own formidable army, possibly even larger than Ramses, with some estimates suggesting a force of 40,000 troops. The stakes were high, the tension palpable, like an ancient game of chess that could decide who got to swagger around the region with impunity. Now Ramses, ever the showman, had divided his forces into 4 divisions, quaintly named after Egyptian gods: Ammon, Ra, Ptah, and Seth. Each division had its own role to play. But here's the kicker. Ramses, feeling particularly gutsy, or maybe just overconfident, decided to race ahead with the Ammon division, leaving the others trailing behind. It's like he was trying to win a race against himself, and spoiler alert, it didn't go as planned. The Hittites, masters of deception, had leaked some false intel suggesting they were miles away, probably sipping some ancient equivalent of a piña colada. Ramses, lapping it up like a thirsty camel, was in for a surprise. When he reached Kadesh, he found Muwatalli's army waiting to greet him, not with flowers, but with a chariot charge that could make even the bravest warrior consider a career change. In the heat of battle, Ramses supposedly transformed into a one-man army, like a superhero without the spandex, rallying his troops and turning the tide. At least, that's what the temple inscriptions would have you believe. These stone-carved accounts, found in places like the Ramesseum and the temples at Luxor and Karnak, paint Ramses as the ultimate warrior king, single-handedly defeating wave after wave of Hittite forces. It's a narrative so grandiose, it makes the Iliad look like a bedtime story. But let's hit pause on the heroics for a second. The The truth, as historians agree, is that the battle ended in a stalemate. Neither side could claim a decisive victory, and both limped away to lick their wounds. Ramses, however, wasn't about to let a little thing like reality get in the way of a good story. He spun the tale of his victory into a piece of propaganda so effective it would make even the most seasoned spin doctor nod in admiration. His version of events became the ancient world's equivalent of a viral YouTube video, carved into temple walls for all to see. And why not? In a world where perception often outweighed reality, Ramses understood the power of narrative. He wasn't just writing history, he was sculpting it, one monumental inscription at a time. These inscriptions weren't just about glorifying his deeds. They served as political tools, reinforcing his status as a godlike figure and deterring potential challengers with tales of his invincibility. The economic impact of this myth-making was significant, too. The temples themselves were economic hubs, drawing pilgrims and tourists, ancient style, who came to marvel at these stories etched in stone. This wasn't just a vanity project. It was a savvy investment in public relations. Ramses, after all, was selling more than a story. He was selling an image, a brand of leadership that promised stability and continuity in a world that was anything but. Yet for all his bluster, Ramses wasn't just a man of war. He was, in many ways, a pragmatist. The aftermath of Kadesh led to the first recorded peace treaty in history, signed with the Hittites in 1258 BCE. It was a diplomatic move that acknowledged the futility of endless conflict and the benefits of cooperation. Ramses knew that sometimes the best way to win was not to fight at all, a lesson as relevant today as it was in his time. So, while the Battle of Kadesh might not have been the triumphant victory Ramses liked to boast about, it was a pivotal moment in his reign. It showcased his flair for the dramatic, his skill in propaganda, and his ability to adapt to the realities of the political landscape. In the end, Ramses' legacy wasn't just built on the victories he claimed, but on the stories he told, and the impact those stories had on his people and his empire. As we continue our journey through the life and times of Ramses II, remember this. History is as much about the legends we create as the facts we uncover. And in the case of Ramses, those legends have a way of making the man and the myth inseparable, a testament to the enduring power of a well-crafted narrative. Stay tuned for more tales from the reign of Egypt's most storied pharaoh, where the lines between fact and fiction blur, leaving us to ponder the true nature of power and legacy. Now, let's pivot from Ramses' battlefield bravado to his monumental architectural ambitions. Because if there's one thing this guy loved more than a good war story, it was a building project so grand it could make modern skyscrapers blush. Enter the temples at Abu Simbel and the Ramesseum, Ramses' love letters to eternity, carved not on paper but into the very bedrock of Egypt. First up, Abu Simbel. Picture this. 2 gargantuan rock temples, carved directly into a mountainside along the Nile's west bank. These colossi are strategically placed to catch the Egyptian sun just right, twice a year illuminating Ramses' stone-carved face like the ancient world's version of a spotlight. This isn't just architecture, it's a cosmic calendar, a celestial flex that screams, "I am eternal." Built around 1244 BCE, Abu Simbel wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a political statement. This monument was a boundary marker, a clear message to Nubia to the south. I'm here, I'm mighty, and you better not forget it. Ramses had the temples constructed at the southern edge of his empire, a strategic choice that served both as a religious site and a constant reminder of Egyptian dominance. But let's not forget the workforce needed for such a monumental endeavor. Contrary to the romanticized image of slaves toiling under the whip, many of Ramses' laborers were actually skilled workers and artisans, paid in rations of grain, beer, and fish. It's like a workers' comp package from ancient Egypt, minus the dental plan. These builders lived in nearby villages, and their efforts were recorded by scribes who documented everything from work schedules to absenteeism. Talk about an early human resources department. The scale of this project was staggering. The larger temple features 4 colossal statues of Ramses himself, each reaching about 66 feet in height. If you're keeping score, that's over 6 stories tall. Ramses wasn't just aiming for posterity, he was gunning for the stars. And the inside, a labyrinth of chambers adorned with intricate carvings depicting Ramses' supposed victories and divine interactions, because why not have a little godly gossip etched for all eternity? But here's the kicker. Abu's symbol, for all its grandeur, was nearly lost to the sands of time. In the 1960s, the construction of the Aswan High Dam threatened to submerge it forever. Enter UNESCO with a rescue mission that would impress even Ramses. The entire site was meticulously dismantled and relocated piece by piece to higher ground. Talk about a moving experience. Now let's stroll down the Nile to the Ramesseum, Ramses' mortuary temple, and another testament to his penchant for the monumental. Located near Luxor, this sprawling complex was Ramses' attempt to outdo his predecessors and etch his legacy into the annals of history. The Ramesseum was not just a temple. It was a veritable city of the dead, complete with storerooms, chapels, and a massive pylon gate adorned with scenes from the Battle of Kadesh. Because, naturally, Ramses never missed a chance to remind everyone how he totally didn't lose that battle. Of course, all these grand designs came with a hefty price tag. Maintaining such projects required a robust economy and a steady flow of resources. Ramses' building spree was funded by the wealth accumulated from trade, taxes, and military conquests. The economic implications were vast, as these projects provided employment but also drained the state's coffers. It was a balancing act of epic proportions, with Ramses juggling public works and national defense like some kind of ancient CFO. And what about the sustainability of these ventures? That's where things get a bit dicey. While Ramses' reign was marked by prosperity, the relentless focus on monumental architecture left Egypt's economy stretched thin. The labor force, while not enslaved in the traditional sense, faced grueling conditions and little room for dissent. And as Ramses' successors would find out, keeping such a vast empire glued together with stone and mortar was easier said than done. So, what drove Ramses to pursue these architectural odysseys? Was it pure ego, a desire for immortality, or a calculated move to assert dominance? Maybe a bit of all three. Whatever the motivations, these colossal structures stood as a testament to his belief in the power of stone and story to defy the ravages of time. In that sense, Ramses was less a ruler and more an artist, chiseling his legacy into the landscape, ensuring that his name would echo long after his reign. As we wrap up this chapter in Ramses' sprawling saga, it's clear that his building projects were more than just feats of engineering. They were the very backbone of his mythos. And while the temples may have started as ego-driven monuments, they evolved into timeless symbols of a civilization's prowess and resilience. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the layers of Ramses' reign, where the line between man and monument blurs into one grand narrative. Ramses II, the pharaoh with a penchant for larger-than-life projects, wasn't just about stacking stones or spinning tales of battlefield bravado. No, Ramses also played the diplomatic game like a seasoned chess master who knew when to swap the sword for a pen. Enter the first recorded peace treaty in history, the Treaty of Kadesh, signed in 1258 BCE with the Hittites. This wasn't just a paper-pushing exercise. It was a monumental shift in how power was wielded in the ancient world. Let's set the stage. By the time Ramses was ready to bury the hatchet with the Hittites, years of skirmishes had bled resources dry and left both empires grasping for stability. Picture 2 heavyweight boxers, both too exhausted to deliver the knockout punch, recognizing that a handshake might be more profitable than another round in the ring. Ramses and Hittite King Hattusili III exchanged diplomatic niceties that were as much about survival as they were about strategy. The treaty, etched into silver tablets, because why not add a touch of bling, laid out terms that were surprisingly modern. It included clauses about mutual defense, extradition of criminals, and even a non-aggression pact. This wasn't just a ceasefire. It was a blueprint for peace that acknowledged the harsh reality that continuous warfare was as economically draining as it was futile. The treaty's text, preserved in cuneiform and hieroglyphs, is a testament to the power of diplomacy over destruction. Ramses' foreign policy was a masterclass in realpolitik, blending pragmatism with the kind of royal theatrics that made him a household name. Sure, he loved a good statue, but he knew that a stable border was a far better investment than another monument. The treaty allowed Ramses to secure his northern frontier, freeing up resources to focus on internal development and those never-ending building projects. It was the ancient equivalent of reallocating the national budget from defense to infrastructure. But why did Ramses, a man who could spin a battle stalemate into a PR coup, opt for peace? The answer lies in the socio-political landscape of the time. The Hittites were formidable foes, and their alliance with the Mycenaeans in Greece posed a significant threat. Ramses recognized that his empire was stretched thin, and a prolonged conflict could tip the scales into chaos. By sidestepping further bloodshed, he could consolidate his power at home and present himself as a wise, benevolent ruler, a brand boost if there ever was one. This diplomatic triumph wasn't without its theatrics, of course. Ramses wasn't just shaking hands, he was orchestrating a spectacle. The treaty was celebrated with pomp and ceremony, complete with lavish banquets and public declarations. It was a show designed to reinforce his image as a peace-bringer, a ruler who could balance the scales of war and peace with equal flair. This was Ramses the statesman, reminding his subjects that a clever deal could still be a grand performance. Behind the scenes, though, the economic realities were biting. The cost of maintaining a vast empire was astronomical, and the treaty allowed Ramses to redirect funds from military campaigns to other pressing matters. Resource management was crucial, and Ramses knew that a stable economy was the foundation of a stable reign. The treaty provided breathing room to bolster trade routes, increase agricultural output, and yes, fund more colossal statues. For the Hittites, the treaty was equally beneficial. They were grappling with their own internal strife and external threats, and a truce with Egypt allowed them to focus on maintaining their empire's integrity. It was a win-win on paper, a rare moment of mutual benefit in a world where might often made right. The Hittite-Egyptian treaty became a model for future diplomatic relations, showing that even the most hardened adversaries could find common ground. The broader impact of the treaty was felt across the ancient Near East, setting a precedent for international diplomacy. It was a recognition that cooperation could be more fruitful than conflict, a lesson that would reverberate through history. Ramses, in his own grandiose way, had demonstrated that power wasn't just about military might. It was also about knowing when to put the sword down and pick up the quill. In the end, Ramses' diplomatic maneuvering was another feather in his well-adorned cap, a testament to his ability to adapt and thrive in a constantly shifting landscape. He understood that the art of ruling wasn't just about commanding armies or building temples. It was about crafting a legacy that could endure beyond the battlefield. And as the Treaty of Kadesh shows, sometimes the most enduring legacies are those written not in stone, but in the art of compromise. As we prepare to dive into the next chapter of Ramses' multifaceted reign, it's clear that his story is one of contrasts, of stone and scribe, of war and peace. Stay tuned as we explore the intricacies of his domestic policies and the challenges that lay ahead, where the line between ambition and reality continues to blur in the ever-unfolding saga of ancient Egypt's most iconic pharaoh. Ramses II, the pharaoh who juggled more hats than a circus performer, was nothing if not a complicated figure. After all, his reign wasn't just a highlight reel of military campaigns and architectural wonders. It was a 66-year marathon of power plays, domestic policies, and cultural shifts that left an indelible mark on Egypt. Ramses, ever the maestro of myth and reality, managed to weave himself into the very fabric of Egyptian identity, becoming a symbol of pharaonic power that echoed long after his mummified remains were tucked away in the Valley of the Kings. So, what was it about Ramses that made him such an enduring icon? Well, for starters, he had a flair for branding that would put any modern marketer to shame. His name was plastered everywhere, from the monumental to the mundane. But beyond the stone-carved selfies, Ramses was a master of the long game, crafting a legacy that was as much about perception as it was about tangible achievements. He was the OG influencer, shaping narratives that would outlast the shifting sands of time. But let's not get too swept up in the grandeur. The reality of Ramses' reign was a mixed bag of triumphs and tribulations. Economically, his projects drained the coffers faster than a sieve, with the state's wealth funneled into his colossal ambitions. The temples and statues were not just monuments to his ego, they were economic engines that needed constant fuel. Laborers had to be fed, materials procured, and trade routes maintained. It's a wonder Egypt didn't crumble under the weight of its own grandeur. Politically, Ramses was a pragmatist. His diplomatic maneuvers were not just about peace treaties and alliances, they were about securing his legacy. He understood that the true power of a ruler wasn't just measured in military victories, but in the stability and prosperity of their realm. By the end of his reign, Ramses had transformed Egypt into a superpower of the ancient world, a feat that required not just brawn but brains. Yet, for all his successes, Ramses was still a man, bound by the same mortality that claims us all. Despite his best efforts to immortalize himself in stone, time had other plans. His supposed divine status, a narrative carefully crafted and propagated during his lifetime, was, at its core, a convenient fiction. Ramses may have been revered as a living god, but the truth was far more mundane. Like every ruler before and after, he was subject to the whims of mortality, his body ultimately succumbing to the sands of time. And let's talk about those myths. Ramses wasn't just a pharaoh, he was a legend in his own time. Stories of his divine parentage and supernatural prowess were as much propaganda as they were belief. In reality, Ramses was a man who understood the power of a good story. He knew that the perception of divine favor was a potent tool in maintaining order and loyalty. But beneath the god-king facade was a ruler who had to contend with the same challenges as any other: famine, rebellion, and the ever-present threat of political unrest. As for his legacy, it's a testament to the power of narrative and the human desire for immortality. Ramses' impact on Egyptian culture and identity is undeniable. He was the archetypal ruler, the yardstick by which all pharaohs were measured. His reign was a golden age that defined an era, but it was also a cautionary tale of hubris and ambition. Ramses' name may have been etched into history, but it was also a reminder that even the mightiest are not immune to the ravages of time. In the end, Ramses II was a man who lived larger than life, his story a blend of fact and fiction that continues to captivate us. His reign was not just a chapter in the annals of history. It was a saga of human ambition, a testament to the enduring power of legacy. As we close the book on Ramses, let's remember that history is as much about the stories we tell as the facts we uncover. And in the case of Ramses, those stories are a legacy all their own. In the bustling metropolis of ancient Babylon, King Hammurabi wasn't just another guy with a crown. He was the original lawmaker, setting the stage for a legal system that would echo through the ages. Picture a city where the streets were lined not with slot machines, but with merchants peddling everything from barley to bronze, and where the local pastime wasn't blackjack but bartering. In this early 18th century BCE setting, Hammurabi, with his epic beard and a knack for governance, decided to do something radical. He wrote down the rules. Now, what do we really know about this Babylonian king who lived around 1792 to 1750 BCE? First off, Hammurabi was the sixth king of the first Babylonian dynasty, ruling over a kingdom that stretched across central Mesopotamia. And while he may not have been the first to conceive the idea of laws, he surely was the first to market them with such flair. His code, inscribed on a diorite stele standing over 7 feet tall, was the equivalent of a monumental billboard proclaiming, "Welcome to Babylon. Play by the rules or else." Hammurabi's Babylon was a city in the heart of Mesopotamia, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Basically, the Beverly Hills of the ancient world, minus the paparazzi. It was a buzzing hub of commerce and culture, attracting traders, scholars, and anyone who had a knack for turning clay tablets into something useful. This was a time when the wheel wasn't just a concept, but the cutting-edge technology that kept the economy, quite literally, rolling. So, what drove Hammurabi to carve out 282 laws on a massive stone? To understand that, we need to consider the chaos of the ancient world. Back then, disputes were settled not in courtrooms but in more, shall we say, creative ways. If your neighbor's goat ate your barley, you couldn't just call a lawyer. Instead, you were left with a he said, she said situation that often ended in a family feud worthy of its own reality series. By writing down the laws, Hammurabi wasn't just laying down the law. He was creating a social contract in a time when contracts weren't exactly written on paper, but pressed into clay. It was a masterstroke of political genius, ensuring that everyone knew where they stood, literally, because the laws were publicly displayed. Hammurabi's code covered everything from property rights to family law, and yes, even what happens if a house collapses and squashes its unfortunate occupants. Spoiler, the builder gets in trouble. Of course, the code of Hammurabi wasn't just about maintaining order. It was about consolidating power. By presenting himself as the divine mouthpiece of the sun god Shamus, who supposedly handed him these laws, Hammurabi was pulling off the ultimate PR stunt. It was like saying, these aren't just my rules, they're cosmic rules. And who would argue with that? After all, in a world where gods could cause floods or famines on a whim, you didn't want to be the one challenging divine authority. Hammurabi's laws were famously harsh, with the principle of lex talionis, or the law of retaliation, at their core. You know the old, an eye for an eye shtick. It's a concept that sounds great if you're on the dishing out end, but less so if you're the one receiving. But let's face it, in a time when life was as predictable as a roll of dice, the idea of predictable justice, albeit severe, had its appeal. The code didn't just focus on punishment, though. It was also about protecting the vulnerable. Take Law 148, for instance. If a man wanted to disown his wife because she couldn't bear children, he'd better have a good reason. Otherwise, she'd get her dowry back and could return to her father's house. A small win, but a win nonetheless in a world where women often had fewer rights than the family goat. As for why Hammurabi chose to solidify his laws in stone, well, let's just say ancient Mesopotamia wasn't exactly a paper-friendly society. Clay tablets were the iPads of the era, but for something as significant as the law, you needed permanence. Enter the 7-foot steel, a multi-ton reminder that you couldn't just erase laws with a damp cloth when they became inconvenient. And speaking of inconvenient, let's not forget the economic context that shaped these laws. Babylon was a commercial powerhouse, and with great commerce came great complexity. Hammurabi's laws covered every conceivable trade dispute, from dodgy deals with unruly merchants to runaway slaves who might have been more entrepreneurial than their masters anticipated. In a city where the market was king, having a legal framework was crucial for keeping the economic wheels greased. It's easy to romanticize Hammurabi as the ultimate lawgiver, but the reality was a tad less glamorous. His reign was marked by warfare and expansion, with his laws serving as much to unify his expanding territory as to administer justice. The code wasn't just about fairness. It was about control, ensuring that the diverse peoples of his empire played by the same rules or else faced the same consequences. So there you have it. Babylon, the city that never slept because it was too busy trading, worshipping, and occasionally waging war. And Hammurabi, the king who decided that winging it wasn't a viable strategy for governance, opting instead for a set of laws that would make even the most stringent of modern bureaucrats nod in approval. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover about this ancient legal legend and the impact of his code on the world. Now, as we dive into the nitty-gritty of the code of Hammurabi, let's first appreciate the sheer audacity of inscribing 282 laws on a single stone stele. Imagine chiseling away at basalt without the luxury of modern power tools. That's dedication, or perhaps the ancient equivalent of a weekend DIY project on a biblical scale. But what treasures of justice and governance did this towering monument hold? Well, buckle up for a journey through a legal labyrinth where justice was dispensed with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. First up, the infamous lex talionis, or an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Sounds like a straightforward recipe for balance, right? Except in practice, it wasn't quite that simple. The code didn't apply equally to all. If a noble broke a commoner's bone, he might get away with a fine, while a commoner doing the same to a noble could end up with a more severe punishment. It's like a sliding scale of justice, where your social status determines just how painful justice might be. Noblemen had their own set of rules, and the lower classes had to navigate a minefield of potential pitfalls. Social inequality wasn't just a modern problem. It was practically chiseled into stone back in Babylon. Now let's talk economy. You think Wall Street is ruthless? Try ancient Babylon, where Law 108 made it clear that if a tavern keeper watered down the beer and the patrons caught wind, she could be drowned as her punishment. Talk about harsh business practices. In a city where beer was safer than water, given the latter's tendency to harbour all sorts of nasties, serving subpar ale was practically a cardinal sin. Hammurabi wasn't just a king. He was a critic of craft brews centuries ahead of his time. Family dynamics under the code of Hammurabi. Oh, they were as complex as a Shakespearean drama, minus the soliloquies. Take Law 195, which decreed that if a son struck his father, his hands would be cut off. That's one way to keep the rebellious teenage phase in check. But before you think the code was all about patriarchal power, consider this. Law 117 let a debtor sell his wife, son, or daughter into slavery for 3 years to pay off his debts. On year 4, they were free to go. It's like a layaway plan, but with human lives. It's a stark reminder that family values have always been tied up with economics. And speaking of economics, Babylon was a trading juggernaut, and Hammurabi's laws reflected that. Law 104 stated that if a merchant gave grain or silver to a broker for trading, the broker had to produce a receipt and settle accounts within a month. Imagine a world without Excel spreadsheets or QuickBooks, where everything depended on the honesty of a broker's word and the durability of clay tablets. It was a high-stakes game of trust, with the looming threat of legal action if things went south. Babylonian traders had to have nerves of steel, or at the very least, a good scribe. The code wasn't just about commerce and corporal punishment, though. It also dealt with some rather specific property laws. Take Law 53, which placed the blame on a farmer if a dam broke and flooded neighboring fields. The farmer had to compensate the affected parties with grain. It's a bit like blaming the neighbor for the leaky roof that douses your living room, except with more mud and less insurance. As Hammurabi's code demonstrates, the Babylonian legal system was remarkably ahead of its time, offering a glimpse at the complexities of property disputes long before the era of real estate agents and zoning laws. But let's not get too starry-eyed about the code's seemingly progressive aspects. It was as much about control as it was about justice. Hammurabi wasn't just a king, he was a master of propaganda. By positioning himself as the earthly representative of the sun god Shamus, he ensured his laws were seen as divine will. Who's going to argue with rules allegedly dished out by a god? It's like having a celestial seal of approval, and it's a tactic that ensured the people of Babylon knew exactly who was in charge. Even the code's protective aspects were double-edged. Take Law 129, which stipulated that if a married woman was caught committing adultery, she and her lover were to be tied together and drowned. However, if the husband decided to pardon his wife, the king could pardon the lover. This law reveals the patriarchal underpinnings of Babylonian society, where a husband's forgiveness was literally life-saving. Romantic, right. But don't be fooled. It's a grim reminder of how justice often depended on the whims of the powerful. Moreover, the code's approach to theft was nothing short of draconian. If someone stole from a temple or palace, they faced the death penalty. Law 6 ensured that the sacred and royal properties were off-limits to sticky fingers, a measure that speaks volumes about the priorities of Hammurabi's administration. Temples and palaces were the beating heart of Babylonian society, and any threat to their wealth was met with swift and unyielding justice. It's a stark contrast to today's slap-on-the-wrist penalties for petty theft. Yet, amidst all this severity, the code did offer some protections for the vulnerable. Law 148, for example, protected women by ensuring that if a man wished to divorce his barren wife, he had to return her dowry. While not exactly a feminist manifesto, it was a recognition of women's rights to some form of economic security, even if it was tethered to their fertility. Babylonian women may not have been on equal footing with men, but the code acknowledged their agency in certain situations, which was no small feat in a male-dominated world. As we peel back the layers of Hammurabi's code, it becomes clear that this was a society grappling with the same issues that vex us today: inequality, justice, economic stability, and the balance of power. It's easy to romanticize Hammurabi as a benevolent ruler, but the reality was far more complex. His laws were as much about keeping the peace as they were about maintaining his grip on power. The code was an instrument of control, wrapped in the guise of divine justice. So, what does this ancient collection of laws tell us about Babylonian society? For one, it reveals a world where the divine and the mundane were inextricably linked, where the king was both a ruler and a religious figurehead. It shows us a society that valued commerce and trade, yet operated under a rigid class system that dictated one's rights and responsibilities. It was a world where justice was swift and often brutal, reminding us that the past was not a kinder, gentler place. As we continue our exploration of the code of Hammurabi, keep in mind that this was just the beginning. Hammurabi's laws were more than mere rules. They were a blueprint for a society that thrived on order and hierarchy, a testament to a ruler who understood the power of the written word in shaping human behavior. The code's influence would echo through the centuries, long after the stones of Babylon had crumbled to dust, leaving behind a legacy that still fascinates and perplexes us to this day. Stay tuned for more revelations about this ancient blueprint of order and control. And as we peel back another layer of Hammurabi's Babylonian onion, let's dive headlong into the economic soup that flavored daily life in this ancient metropolis. You might think of Babylon as a place of grandiose temples and monumental codes, but behind those grand facades was an economy running on the gritty details that could make or break a Babylonian's day. Forget Wall Street. This was Grain Street, where the price of barley could make a man rich or drive him to ruin faster than you can say commodity futures. First, let's talk about the backbone of Babylon's economy: agriculture. Back in the day, renting a cow was no small affair. Law 245 of the Code of Hammurabi deals with the rental of oxen and other livestock. If you rented an ox and it died from neglect, you were liable to replace it with another of equal quality. Picture it as the ancient version of car insurance, except instead of a fender bender, you're dealing with a four-legged workhorse. And speaking of livestock, Law 263 stated that if a shepherd let his flock graze in a field without permission, he had to pay a hefty fine of 20 kor of grain per hectare. That's enough barley to make a lifetime supply of beer, assuming the tavern keeper didn't water it down and end up sleeping with the fishes. Rent wasn't just about oxen. Babylonian farmers often leased land from wealthy landowners, paying a portion of their harvest as rent. This wasn't your average landlord-tenant relationship. If the harvest failed due to a flood or bad weather, the tenant could appeal to the gods, but the landlord, much like the modern taxman, still expected his cut. It was a tough gig, where the only thing predictable was the unpredictability of nature, and the only constant was the landlord's demand for grain. Then there was the price of a haircut. Yes, even ancient Babylonians needed a trim now and then, and barbers were an essential part of urban life. While we don't have law codes detailing the cost of a shave and a haircut, 2 bits, we do know that barbers were often slaves or lower-class citizens trying to scrape by. They provided more than just grooming services. They were the therapists and gossip hubs of their time, offering an ear while wielding a sharp blade. A risky combination, if you ask me, especially if the latest news involved your indiscretions. And let's not forget the clay tablet economy. Scribes were the unsung heroes of Babylon, the Google Docs of their day, recording transactions, contracts, and disputes. They were the custodians of business records, the ones who ensured that when you bought a donkey, you actually got a donkey and not a mule with a forged pedigree. Without these scribes, the complex web of Babylonian trade and commerce would have been as tangled as a ball of yarn in a litter of kittens. But what about the underdogs of Babylon's economy? Hammurabi's laws had a thing or two to say about them. Unfortunately, if you were a debtor or a slave, life was about as forgiving as a Babylonian summer. Law 117, as mentioned, allowed debtors to sell family members into temporary slavery to settle debts. It's a grim reminder that while the code offered some protections, it also cemented the social hierarchy, with the poor often finding themselves on the sharp end of the legal stick. Yet amid this harsh economic landscape, there were glimpses of fairness. Take Law 241, which stated that if a man hired a boat and the boat was damaged due to the owner's negligence, the owner was liable for the loss. It's like suing your rental car company because the brakes didn't work and you ended up in the Euphrates. This law underscored the importance of accountability, an unusual but welcome nod to consumer rights in a world where survival was a full-time job. As for the merchants, they were the risk-takers of Babylon, dealing in everything from textiles to precious metals. They trekked across the dusty trade routes of Mesopotamia, bringing back exotic goods and tales of distant lands. Law 104 required merchants to provide receipts for transactions, a practice that would feel right at home in today's business world. This wasn't just about keeping the books straight. It was about trust in an era when a man's word was his bond and clay tablets were the closest thing to a contract. But let's not romanticize too much. The Code of Hammurabi was less about protecting the little guy and more about keeping the economic machine well-oiled. The laws ensured that trade disputes didn't spiral into chaos, that property rights were clear, and that the social order was maintained. It was, after all, a tool for control, wrapped in the guise of justice. Hammurabi's Babylon was a place where economic realities were as hard and unyielding as the stone on which the laws were carved. In this land of commerce and code, the interplay between law and economy was as intricate as a Babylonian tapestry. The legal system was the scaffolding on which the city's economy was built, dictating everything from the rental of livestock to the penalties for watering down beer. It was a world where justice was a commodity, traded and bartered in the marketplace alongside grain and textiles, a world where the price of a mistake could be as heavy as the stones of Babylon itself. So, as we continue to unravel the mysteries of Hammurabi's Babylon, remember that behind every law, every transaction, and every chiseled line of the code lies a story of human endeavor. It's a testament to a civilization that thrived amidst the harsh realities of its time, where the pursuit of economic stability was as relentless as the Tigris and Euphrates themselves. Stay tuned, because Babylon's story is far from over, and there's still much more to discover about this ancient city where laws were as enduring as the legends they inspired. As we delve deeper into the labyrinth of Hammurabi's Babylon, it's time to take a detour beyond its bustling markets and grandiose legal monuments to explore how the Code of Hammurabi extended its influence far beyond the city walls. You see, the code wasn't just a domestic affair. It was the ancient equivalent of a viral sensation, reaching parts of Mesopotamia faster than you can say cuneiform tablet. Neighboring regions couldn't help but take notice, their rulers both intrigued and perhaps a bit envious of Hammurabi's strategic use of law as a tool for consolidation and control. To really grasp the political ripple effects of the code, you need to understand the backdrop of constant territorial tussles. Picture this: a region teeming with city-states like Assyria, Elam, and Mari, each with its own ambitions and a penchant for skirmishes that would make medieval knights look like rookies. Hammurabi's Babylon was smack dab in the middle of this geopolitical chessboard, and his laws became the queen piece, able to shift the game in his favor with a single move. Hammurabi's code wasn't just about keeping Babylonian merchants in check or ensuring tavern keepers weren't skimping on the brew. Its existence was a statement, a declaration of a centralized authority that could maintain order across a sprawling and culturally diverse empire. By inscribing the laws in stone, Hammurabi sent a not-so-subtle message to his neighbors. We've got our act together, and chaos isn't invited to this party. Now, let's talk about the neighbors. The city-state of Mari, under King Zimri-Lim, was one of those keeping a close watch. Hammurabi's legal prowess must have been the talk of the town. After all, Mari was a hub of trade and culture, not unlike Babylon. The code's comprehensive nature, covering everything from criminal to commercial law, meant it was more than just a legal document. It was a blueprint for governance. Zimri-Lim had to consider how this might affect trade with Babylon or influence his own laws. After all, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and in the ancient world, it was also a survival tactic. But let's not get too carried away with the idea of a legal utopia. While Hammurabi's code was revolutionary, it wasn't exactly a one-size-fits-all solution. The laws were tailored to Babylon's specific social and economic conditions, reflecting its class structure and priorities. Neighboring rulers might have admired the structure, but adapting it wholesale was another challenge. The code's principle of lex talionis, for example, was appealing in its simplicity, but required a nuanced understanding of local customs and hierarchies to apply effectively. Now, if you think Hammurabi was sitting back, basking in the adulation of his legal triumph, think again. The code was as much a tool of propaganda as it was of justice. By positioning himself as the conduit of divine will, he not only reinforced his own legitimacy, but also set a precedent for rulership that neighboring leaders couldn't ignore. There's a reason why the stele depicted Hammurabi receiving the laws from Shamus, the sun god. It was a visual power play, a reminder that earthly authority was divinely sanctioned. Try arguing with that when your own gods hadn't issued any legal edicts lately. Beyond the borders of Babylon, the code's impact on social hierarchies was profound. In a world where status dictated life and death, Hammurabi's laws codified a rigid class structure that left little room for social mobility. The nobles had their privileges, the free men their responsibilities, and the slaves their burdens. This wasn't just a Babylonian phenomenon. It was a common thread in ancient societies, but Hammurabi's code made it explicit, setting a template that others would follow. The laws were a double-edged sword, promising order and fairness, but often delivering them on unequal terms. Yet, the allure of order in a chaotic world was hard to resist. The code's emphasis on accountability and protection of property was appealing, especially in regions where trade was the lifeblood of the economy. In a time when a single bad harvest or a marauding band of raiders could spell disaster, the promise of legal recourse was a comforting thought. Hammurabi's neighbors might have envied his legal acumen, but they also understood the value of a system that could keep the wheels of trade turning and the coffers full. In this ancient dance of diplomacy and power, Hammurabi's code was a masterstroke. It wasn't just a set of rules. It was an assertion of Babylon's cultural and political dominance. By exporting his legal ideals, Hammurabi wasn't just spreading a method of governance. He was extending Babylon's influence, creating a legacy that would outlast the city itself, echoing through the corridors of history long after the stones of Babylon had crumbled. And so, the Code of Hammurabi became more than a mere collection of laws. It was a catalyst for change, a testament to the power of the written word in shaping human society. It served as a reminder that law and order, when wielded with skill, could be as potent as any army, as enduring as the stones upon which it was inscribed. As we continue to explore the reverberations of this ancient legal marvel, remember that its story is far from over, and the lessons it holds are as relevant today as they were in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia. Stay tuned, because the impact of Hammurabi's code is just beginning to unfold, and there's still much more to discover in this tale of ambition, law, and power. Despite the echoes of ancient power plays and the political chess game that Hammurabi's code initiated, it's time to peel back the layers and see what's really cooking under that stony facade. The Code of Hammurabi is one of those historical marvels that continues to capture our imagination, like a blockbuster sequel that keeps audiences coming back for more. But why is that? Why does this ancient set of laws remain as intriguing as a Mesopotamian soap opera where every drama unfolds in cuneiform? First, let's tackle the myths head-on. For starters, Hammurabi's code wasn't the world's first legal document, despite what you might have heard in a high school history class. That title probably belongs to the Code of Ur-Nammu, pennied a good few centuries earlier in Mesopotamia. But Hammurabi's code was undoubtedly more comprehensive, carving out a reputation for being the most detailed and enduring. It's the ancient equivalent of a legal magnum opus, a symphony of statutes that hummed through the ages even if it wasn't the opening act. Now, about those laws. They're often romanticized as the first attempt at justice, a noble king's quest to civilize his kingdom. But let's not kid ourselves. Hammurabi wasn't exactly a benevolent judge handing out fairness like free candy. His code was brutal, a reflection of a society where life was tough and justice was tougher. The eye for an eye mantra might sound like poetic justice, but it was more like a grim reminder that equality in punishment was a luxury reserved for the few. Hammurabi's laws were less about justice and more about maintaining order, a strategy to keep the social hierarchy nicely layered like a Babylonian lasagna. But here's where things get juicy. The legacy of Hammurabi's code isn't just about the laws themselves. It's about the idea of codifying laws in the first place. By putting pen to stone, Hammurabi set a precedent that would shape civilizations for millennia. The Romans, for instance, took a page from his book, literally, when they developed the 12 Tables, another cornerstone in the foundation of Western legal thought. The notion that laws should be written, accessible, and permanent was revolutionary, and paved the way for everything from the Magna Carta to the U.S. Constitution. And speaking of revolutions, let's touch on the modern echoes of Hammurabi's code. If you've ever felt the sting of a parking ticket or sighed at a convoluted tax form, you can thank Hammurabi for starting the paperwork party. The very concept of a written legal system, one that evolves and adapts, finds its roots in those ancient stones. Of course, we've come a long way from the days where drowning was a legitimate business penalty, but the basic principle of accountability remains steadfast. Yet not everything about Hammurabi's code is worthy of a standing ovation. Some aspects are hilariously outdated, like the idea that a builder should be executed if a house collapses and kills its owner. Imagine applying that logic today. You'd have a lot of nervous contractors. It's a poignant reminder that while some principles of justice are timeless, others are best left in the dustbin of history. It's these contrasts that offer a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of human society, where the absurd often walks hand in hand with the groundbreaking. So why does Hammurabi's code continue to resonate? Perhaps it's the allure of a time when laws were simple, brutal, and clear. A stark contrast to today's labyrinthine legal systems that often feel more like a maze than a map. Or maybe it's the enduring human desire for order, an echo of our ancient ancestors' struggles to impose structure on a chaotic world. In a society where justice was as much about divine will as human decree, Hammurabi's code was a beacon of stability, a reminder that even in tumultuous times, there was a framework to cling to. But let's not get too misty-eyed. The code wasn't just about noble ideals or divine justice. It was a tool of control, as pragmatic as it was prophetic. Hammurabi understood the power of the written word in shaping not only governance but also perception. By wrapping his laws in the cloak of divine authority, he ensured his rule was seen as divinely sanctioned, a clever move that kept dissent at bay and his legacy intact. In the end, the Code of Hammurabi is a testament to the complexities of power and justice, a reflection of the societies that have carried its lessons forward through time. It's a reminder that while the past may be a foreign land where they did things differently, its stories still hold a mirror to the present, revealing truths about human nature that remain unchanged. As we sift through the myths and realities, one thing is clear. Hammurabi's code was more than a set of rules. It was a milestone in the human story, a narrative of ambition, control, and the endless pursuit of order in a disordered world. And so, as the sands of time continue to shift, the stones of Babylon may have crumbled, but the legacy of its most famous lawgiver endures, etched not only in ancient steel, but in the very fabric of legal thought. A fitting tribute to a king who knew the power of the pen, or chisel, better than most, and whose influence still echoes in the corridors of justice, reminding us that the past is never as distant as it seems.